Take it all away there.
Let me open a regular meeting, City Council, City of Pearland, for Monday, July the 27th, year 2020. This session is being conducted with telephone and video conferencing and techniques. And as we go through the process, that will be our transmittal and communication. Moving in our agenda down to new item number 1, I call it to order. And item number 2 is the invocation by Councilmember Orlando and the Pledge of Allegiance by Hernandez. Did they get that?
Yes, sir, Mayor, I heard. This is Hernandez. I'll be doing the pledge. Okay.
Councilman Orlando will give the invocation, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Hernandez. Are they not picking that
up? Mayor, Councilmember Orlando is having some audio difficulties, so if we can skip him, move on to the next council member.
Okay. Are we ready to do the invocation?
I'll do it, Mayor. This is Councilman Little.
Okay. Councilmember Little will do the invocation. Hernandez will do the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, if you bow your heads with me. Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight and ask for your guidance. Give us wisdom and compassion to make the right choices for the citizens that we represent. We ask that you would get rid of this COVID virus as soon as you can, or as soon as it is your will. We ask that you protect our first responders, our police, fire, and EMT, and also our men in service, both here and abroad. And we ask your blessing on all of those that are suffering in mind, body, or spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, everyone please stand and join me in the pledge. We'll start with the American flag, then the Texas. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all. And now to the Texas flag. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance
to the Texas
state
under God, one indivisible.
Thank you.
Well done with a slight echo in the background. But moving in our agenda to item number 3, roll call and certification of quorum. Councilmember Little.
Mayor.
Councilmember Orlando.
Your Mayor.
Councilmember Carbone.
Here, Mayor.
Councilmember Moore.
Mayor.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes, sir, Mayor. Reporting for duty.
Councilmember Perez.
I'm present, Mayor.
I believe Councilmember Owens will be absent from the meeting tonight. And after reviewing the numbers, Madam Secretary, I will certify a quorum for the meeting tonight. Moving to item number 4, citizen comments. Mayor Pro Tem Little.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you, ma'am.
This is,
All right, we have 5 people signed up to speak tonight. Most of you know the routine. Before you start speaking, state your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And the first person up is Congressman Pete Olson.
Well, thank you, Mayor Reed, Pearland City Council members, City Manager Pearson. I want to talk on behalf of the citizens of Pearland, Texas. First of all, we know how hard it's been for y'all the past couple of months. The COVID-19 crisis is still ongoing. Now it's hurricane season. You may want some good news. I have some great news, and I hope this is a surprise. One of the actions I can take as your congressman is to name a federal building or interstate highway after deserving member of our local community. We have one simple rule to go forward with this endeavor. Every member of Congress from a state must approve the renaming of some building. That's simple for states like Vermont, Delaware, and Wyoming. They have only one congressman. We have 36 in Texas. That means every Republican and Democrat in Texas has to approve a bill. If one objects, this bill dies. You may recall that 115th Congress, I was able to get 36 Texans to sign on a new post office name for a fallen Pearland police officer, Andy Akpanya. The Silver Lake Post Office now bears his name. And I'm thrilled to report that the 116th Congress, I've got the entire Texas delegation. Gohmert, Crenshaw, Taylor, Ratcliffe, Gooden, Wright, Fletcher, Brady, Green, McCall, Conaway, Granger, Thornberry, Weber, Gonzalez, Escobar, Flores, Jackson Lee, Arrington, Castro, Roy, Hurd, Marchant, Williams, Burgess, Cloud, Cuellar, Garcia, Bernice Johnson, Carter, Allred, Beasy, Vela, Lloyd, and Babin to support a new name for our post office at 3519 East Walnut, named after a true icon in Pearland, Texas. But we have one final hurdle to make this get through the House. The person who is honored must approve the new name. We all know this icon. He's a native-born Texan. He came to Pearland in 1965. This man helped get us to the moon and build the International Space Station. He's been in the same chair since 1978 because this man loves Pearland, Texas. He saw our small town grow from 6,000 people to over 130,000 this past year. He's retired this year because almost 95 years old, his life now demands more free time. So, on behalf of the citizens of Pearland, Texas, and the entire Texas delegation, I'm proud to announce that the first hurdle to name a post office after Mayor Tom Reed has been crossed. Now we have one problem going forward. To have us actually go forward the House, we need approval of the man who bears this honor. So let's have a simple roll call vote. Mayor, on behalf of a great full city of Pearland, Texas, give us a yay or a nay on a new post office bearing your name.
Wow. Congressman, that's special. As usual, you have lit the fire here.
Well, thank you, Mayor Arquette. That is a yes. Congratulations, Mayor Reed. I'd like the city council guys, give me a thumbs up. You guys all good to go on the council? There we go, without objection. This is going forward to the House. And Mayor Tom, I want to close by thanking you for loving Pearland, Texas. We all love you, but you love us more. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You will be missed. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. That was superb. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Olson. The next person signed up to speak is Jimmy Davis.
City Council and Honorable Mayor, I come to you tonight first congratulating and expressing support that the post office nearest my house, I'm sorry, Jimmy Davis, 5004 Coniston Street, Pearland, Texas, 77584. I'm excited to hear that the post office nearest my house is going to be named after Mayor Reed. This is something I'm very supportive of. Gentlemen, I want to bring a few brief points to your attention tonight. Today I received from the City of Pearland documentation of resident complaints that I sought in February of this year. That was we're told was the reason we changed to a 28-day meter read cycle. The documentation I received indicates no residents complained about varying days on their bills. Residents moving in and out of Pearland are being billed for many months of consumption on a single monthly tier. Somebody who lives here for years and pays a bill every month, but because of our change, has fallen behind on being billed for consumption. They're getting a final bill with very large consumption charges being billed at the top tier rate because it's being billed as if they use 30,000 gallons of water in 1 month when they did not. New business item number 2. I asked the City Council to adopt a policy and provide direction on this item that any additional property tax revenue that is collected above what we budgeted should be paid towards our debt. Our debt service rate is more than half our property tax rate, and $800,000 represents a 1 cent reduction in tax rate. That means an additional $1 million in revenue, if we applied it to debt, would represent a 1 1/4 cent reduction in our debt service rate. Regarding new business item number 3, as Congressman Olson pointed out, the COVID-19 effects are significant. Small businesses are feeling the crunch. People are getting laid off. We just had a major oil and gas company, Schlumberger, announce they're cutting 20,000 jobs. How many of those people might live in Pearland? They're going to get a pink slip. We know that our sales tax revenue is down, and PEDC revenue comes from sales tax. I appreciate that they're saying they're going to cover the cost for new business number 3, but since their revenue comes from sales tax, which is down, I think there's wisdom in delaying approving this. We definitely want attractive intersections along 288, and we can beautify the corridor. Absolutely, I support that, but not in these uncertain economic times. I ask you to move to delay it, and we revisit it when we're in better economic conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Next person up is Felicia Harris-Haas.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, congratulations, Mayor. Well-deserved and perfectly timed honor for you. Thank you, Council. Felicia Harris-Haas, 3112 Sumac. Hope you're all doing well. Just wanted to talk briefly about the budget. This is a situation where I know on the September 23rd meeting, the council members encouraged residents to get involved and to get involved early. So heeding that advice, I wanted to put on the table something for your consideration, COVID-19. It's an interesting situation that's hypothetical that is essentially a reality. The discussion back in September was among council members who supported and opposed the budget, dealt with what are necessities and discussions about what we could take out of the budget. I know Councilmember Little, Owens, and Reed talked about taking out some things. Well, interestingly, COVID has done that. In the June 18, 2020 memo, the city manager presented to council, he said that $4.2 million was taken out of the budget for fiscal year 20, quote, primarily expenditures not directly related to services being provided. Councilmember Perez at the July 13th meeting called those expenditures, and I quote, we've determined as unnecessary, close quote. I would submit that if those expenditures are not necessary and there was questions about their necessity back in September, we now know that there were some expenses in our budget that were not necessary. I would submit that getting a list of those expenses might be the $4.2 million, might be the first step once the council gets the budget and start looking at whether or not we need to address the necessity of anything in the budget that is similar to what was cut. I don't know, I'd put it on the table, but I do know that at the meeting there was this comment made by Councilmember Moore, which I thought very poignant.
I said back in February, I don't want anything in this budget because we can't afford it. We cannot continue to add and add and add and add to our budget. We just can't.
Following up on that, I want to address some of the things that are on the table tonight for council's consideration that directly affect the tax rate and the budget. First of all, the CIP. I noticed that in the CIP, there's $66 million worth of certificates of obligation that council is being asked to approve. I note that last year in strong economic times, council put on the election cycle in 2019 general obligation bonds to the tune of about $80 million. I question whether taking on $66 million in debt, certificates of obligation and downtimes is a wise move, especially since that $66 million in the CIP is essentially equivalent to the leftover 2019 GOs of $69.6 million. Let the voter, in September, the council said they wanted the voters to have an input and say into the budget. Let the voters have a say into the budget. Let the voters have a say in the $66 million of debt that the city wants to take on. I second Mr. Davis's comments about the $14 million and the $2 million budget amendment. I will save the rest of my time and yield it. Thank you, council, and I hope you consider this tonight and allow the citizens to hear your discussion about those certificates of obligation so we know that we do have a voice in the budget.
Thank you, Ms. Haas. The next speaker up is Jeff Hunkill.
Hello, this is Jeff Hunkley at 3912 Oakwood Drive, North Pearland, Texas, 77581. Congratulations, Mayor Reed. Well deserved. I wanted to speak on a few topics, and the first is the water billing issue. I know there were several meetings where council settled on the 3230 plan. I charted my last 2 years of bills, and my reading dates are still for 28 days. However, the gap between my billing and read dates are widening. It went from 76 days in 2018 to 123 days as of July. I had previously recommended the council to put alerts in the billing software to catch if this gap deviates an acceptable level, but it appears to be getting worse. In a future meeting, could we have an update on what has been done to correct these errors and what future plans will be made to make sure this doesn't happen again? My next topic is regarding the 288 improvement plan for just over $14 million. Two of the costliest items of this project are the landscaping and parent shelters. Small businesses are closing while people are losing their jobs and struggling to maintain their own budgets. The council is voting to spend $2 million on parent shelters and over $7 million to plant 10,000 trees and shrubs. I understand this area needs signs, painting, and sidewalks. I would categorize these as needs. But parent sculptures, landscaping, and fountains that make up 70% of the total cost in these uncertain economic times, these are the ones that can be put off until we have a clear vision for our future. Finally, regarding the 5-year capital improvement program, can some of these projects be pushed out to a later time or scaled back? One of the projects is an overpriced $13 million animal shelter, $23.5 million for a new library when people are currently in lockdown for the foreseeable future. Has a usability study been done to see how many people check out books? Especially with schools offering virtual learning, maybe it's time to get creative and instead of a large facility to house thousands of books that require constant staff, maintenance, and upkeep, in a smaller facility, a better use of funds. We can offer an online checkout system and Kindles that could be checked out with a security deposit. The building could include more computer bays for people that don't have access at home. Also, there are 3 fire stations scheduled at $8, $7, and $10 million. Again, has a study been done to warrant each of these? I would request to separate out the medical calls from the fire-related calls. Maybe a full-blown fire station isn't needed at this time, and more of a medical emergency facility that can later be developed into a fire station. Gentlemen, we are in unprecedented times, and I believe this calls for more creative solutions and not the typical ones previously used in better financial times. Thank you for your time and attention, and I hope you all stay well and safe.
Thank you, Mr. Hunkley. Mayor, that completes our public, hold on, we have one more, I'm sorry. John Alban. Mr. Alban, are you online?
He is. Just 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Reed, City Council, and Mr. Pearson. My name is John Albin, 1806 Barrett's Glen Drive. I am the Vice President of the Pearland Police Officers Association. Thank you for this opportunity for me to speak on behalf of the 174 members of our organization. In September of 2016, the City of Pearland hired Management Advisory Group to conduct an employee compensation and classification study. One objective of the study was a salary survey to compare compensation to relevant peer and competitor organizations. Due to this study, compensation was adjusted in April 2018. This process from start to completion took approximately 19 months. On February 1st, 2019, a white paper was drafted by the Human Resources Department for fiscal year 2020. The document recommended that for the city to remain competitive and stay in line with other cities for fiscal year 20 and beyond, a 4% increase to the police pay plan would be needed. When the FY20 budget was finalized and approved by City Council, a 2% increase was applied to the police officer pay plan instead of the recommended 4% increase. The white paper goes into further detail that a salary market review should be conducted every 3 to 4 years to assess market conditions and ensure competitive posture in personnel recruitment and retention. City staff recommended a study in October of 2020 or be able to articulate a reasonable delay in the study until October 2021 at a cost of $50,000 to $70,000. As a result of a decline in the compensation percentages of the Pearland police officer pay scale when compared to the market, and the possibility of a postponement of a compensation survey until 2021, any potential market survey increase wouldn't go into effect until mid-year 2022 or mid-year 2023, based on the time frame of the previous study. This would be insupportable by PPOA. Therefore, in December of 2019, the PPOA Executive Board requested the assistance of the Texas Municipal Police Association in Austin, Texas, to conduct a compensation survey. The results of the compensation survey by TMPA were showed and provided to PPOA in January of 2020, and that showed that the pay scale for Pearland police officers had declined in comparison to Allen, Baytown, College Station, Frisco, League City, McKinney, Missouri City, Pasadena, Richardson, and Round Rock. With the exception of Baytown, these police agencies were the same as the police agencies detailed in the results of the Management Advisory Group study paid for by the City of Pearland in 2016. The data reveals that there is a negative 6.69% difference in market average for the starting pay for a Pearland police officer. The top out pay for Pearland police officer is negative 3.7% of market average. The below market averages continue for police sergeant and lieutenant pay at negative 4.34% and negative 1.21% respectively. It is the opinion of the PPOA that any continued postponement of a compensation survey will only lead to continued disparity in the Pearland police officer pay scale. Police agencies continue to compete for quality applicants. The City of Pearland is no exception. As of tonight, the Pearland Police Department has 5 unfilled police officer positions. An additional 9 police officer positions will be requested for the FY 2021 budget. We ask council to review, consider, and take action on police compensation increase to the market average. We express our sincerest appreciation for the opportunity to speak to you, as well as the great citizens of the City of Pearland. And on behalf of the Pearland Police Officers Association, we thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alban. Mayor, that completes our public speakers tonight.
Okay, moving to item number 5 on our agenda, public hearings. There are none tonight. Moving to item 6 is the consent agenda. Councilmember Little, would you indicate the items to be removed from the consent agenda, which is 5 items, I believe.
Yes, Mayor. Councilman Hernandez has requested that we remove item D Delta from.
D is in Delta, okay.
And that's all.
Just Delta.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Moving then let me mark this down here. That information in place. I'm going to ask is Councilmember Alondo in the audience yet?
Here, Mayor.
Is Yolanda here?
I'm here, Mayor.
Okay, would you present the consent agenda for our consideration?
Sure, Mayor. Consideration and possible action on the consent agenda with the exception of item D. So moved.
Second, Hernandez.
I have a motion and a second. Council have any? Does the council have a response to that?
We need to vote.
Okay, all right. Moving then to vote.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
The motion passes 7-0. I'm sorry, 6-0.
0.
Yes, sir. 6-0 to approve all consent items except for item D.
Okay. Moving to item B, Councilmember Alonso, would you present this for our consideration?
Consideration and possible action resolution number R 2020-132. So moved.
Second, this is Moore.
That information, please. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Item D is a recommendation for renewal of our employee health insurance plan. We obviously offer a variety as part of our overall benefit package. Very pleased with the performance of the fund and the recommendation that we have for you. Again, the providers are renewal and the rates are very competitive and positive for the city and the employees. We are able through this recommendation to essentially provide no change to the employees in terms of their contributions. We are able to do that with the strength of the internal service fund. That is our health service plan that we have made adjustments to that and we're able to provide that. And so overall, we're able to make it all come out and for 2021, basically stay at par. We thought that was important given the times and the uncertainty with being able to provide significant or any wage adjustments, that we didn't want to see this, if at all possible, creep up on the employees. And so we're able to do that. Again, as part of our program, single employees on our base 80-20 program, which is what we index our other offerings out of. The city provides 100% of that for those single employees. And then other programs, the HSA and the other Kelsey programs fall from that. So nothing really to highlight, but happy to answer any questions. We do have a representative from HUB and our staff available for any questions.
A question or comment based on the staff report?
Yeah, hey, this is Adrian. Can you touch on also, again, this is mainly I just wanted to be presented for kind of just some public knowledge as well. Can you touch on some of it looks like there was a couple, not concessions, but additions to this. That's the end of the medical, the $50,000 credit, the first month's admin fee. And then the other question I had was the $5,000 to $20,000 bump for the communications allowance. What is that communications for specifically, if you could?
Yeah, so that's internal for, we provide incentives and programs. We do, fitness activities, contests. And so that's all part of that. Mr. Weaver's here from HUB. I mean, maybe you can mention anything else you want to highlight from that specifically. And what was the thing you mentioned at the beginning, the 5,000, what was that?
So that was the communication bump. It said it says Cigna has agreed to continue the $65,000 wellness allowance and increase the proposed communication allowance from $5,000 to $20,000.
Right.
And I guess what I'm trying to point out, I guess, for public is I saw that the overall claims rate had a very small increase. I mean, it seems like we're doing a good job of keeping claims down.
Yep.
And so if that's the case, hopefully, we can highlight how those types of things with this plan will help to, minimize overall cost on the coverage side of things. So
Right, right.
I'm hoping that's
So
what that's
the
for.
program's been running well. I know there's an adjustment several years ago, and we're in the Kelsey program, and we renewed with them last year maybe. But that's been very successful for, I think, what you're alluding to in terms of a win-win for the employees and their health and their dependents, and the the city as the providers. So, Mike, you want to add something else?
Clay, really that the communication budget, it came in very handy this year because we're unable to bring employees in for open enrollment meetings. It's just not a good idea to bring everybody in one big room anymore. And we did use some of that money to put together a video to help explain the benefits to the employees. Now, the $20,000 is for next plan year. And, we do plan to help communicate some of the, more cost containment ideas within the program, trying to get people to do their routine physicals, trying to get them to utilize telemedicine, virtual care more, try to keep them out of the emergency room. And so that money will be used actually to help try to increase the level of care in the future, but also reduce the cost.
Okay, I appreciate that, the clarification. That's, like I said, just wanted to go over this for some public knowledge and just to clarify that one point. So I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Good. Council, have any question or comment from council?
Yeah, Clay, since it got pulled, something we discussed offline, but maybe for the benefit of the public, since it's a matter of discussion, can you talk about the increases that are reported for what is projected from fiscal year 2020 up to 2023, and what's pushing those prices up?
Sure. So, I mean, the big driver is the fact that, we're still a growing organization, growing city, serving the growing population. And we've added positions. This year, we're fortunate to secure a SAFER grant for the first years of additional fire department staffing. But those benefits, are part of our budget. And so those get in, and then the projections are for following through on Station 8 and the second rig there, and adding employees there, additional police we've added, et cetera, et cetera. So all those positions are, the driver. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but that's the program is performing well. There are costs, but if you look at the per capita, it's been very strong year over year, last couple of years.
So generally, per employee, we're holding pretty steady, and the increase is due to adding employees over the next several years.
Right. I believe it's up. I haven't looked at it recently. We've had briefings on that, but that's true. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other comment or question at this point? I believe we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore? Councilmember Moore? I think he's having some technical difficulties.
I can play a recording of him saying yes.
Aye.
There he is.
Okay, great. Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
The motion passes 6-0 to approve resolution number R 2020-132.
Great. Good. Item number 7, ask the matter removed from the consent agenda. We just had that one. Moving to item number 8, which is new business. And to start this off right, I'm going to ask Councilmember Carbone to set the good example.
All right, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, resolution R 2020-135. So moved.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The resolution before you is a adoption of our capital improvement program. This is by definition a long-term investment program for the city's responsibilities of facilities, roads, water, wastewater system, parks. And so these things take years to develop in terms of the design, the road, the land acquisition, the planning for them, the financing partners. And so the City of Pearland by its growth is been catching up on a number of needs. We've heard oftentimes about traffic and other amenities and facilities. And so we've been very aggressive about that. And the staff's been outstanding in terms of once the council approves a plan, delivering on that. There's you see the bi-monthly capital improvement milestone reports that proves that up. And so this is an important piece of that work. There's a number of projects that are mostly you've seen time and again with prior actions. One category would be the voter approved 2019 bond issue. Those are all in here. We made a commitment that we would get those underway in a timely basis, and that's been done and is being done right now. So the capital improvement program before you solidifies that and provides that. Last year was the first year we pulled this out of the normal budget, so we'd have extra eyes on that, and we dealt with that separately and earlier. This year we took another step even more than that, and the council indulged and met us on a Saturday, and we went through this and talked about the structuring primarily of the financing on the debt side, but the projects also we touched on. And so this is the actual program that we have laid out and meets so many of the needs that we have before us. So Trent Epperson is the key person leading that charge on delivery. And so he'll talk about that a little bit and then kick it over to Mr. Upton.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson, and good evening, Mayor and Council. As Clay said, this is the presentation of the 21 through 25 capital improvement program and the adoption of that. And so the first thing I just wanted to walk you through before I actually hand it over to the true expert, Mr. Robert Upton, is going through the overall calendar to get to this point and moving forward from there. So this is the capital financing process overview. This is something we took a look at a couple of months ago when we had our Saturday session on the CIP. And so what this does is breaks that process down into basically three phases: the policy and planning, which starts with our early budget input session, the development of the CIP, and then in June we did a CIP presentation and discussion, and now we have the adoption before you tonight. We then move into the execution phase, which is moving through the budget process over the next couple of months, and then getting into October for the intent to reimburse. And what that is, it actually authorizes the work on these projects before you tonight for fiscal year 21 to start. So once we have that intent to reimburse, Robert and his crew are off and running with the projects, and we start these projects and then follow that up with the operational phase, which is actually going through and selling the debt for those projects that are underway that we just completed for FY20. So just wanted to kind of set the stage for where we are and where we go on this. And now I'm going to hand it over to Robert to run through the capital improvement program. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Let's see if I can get my... Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm gonna have to apologize. My camera is not working today. It's not coming on the screen. So there we go. There we are. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Mr. Pearson, Mr. Epperson, for this time to be able to present to you a little bit more about what we are all mentioning, which is the capital improvement program. But I wanted to provide a little bit of refresher first to talk about what the characteristics are of a capital improvement program. This is all related to new construction, which is major and non-routine. We talk about long life expectancy. We're looking at a long-term return for our investment that we're investing in with those general obligation bonds, voter approved, et cetera, partnerships with TxDOT, and also with TERS reimbursements as well. Also, we can take a look at rehabilitation of our programs, those dealing in our water and wastewater field that will extend the life of an asset or provide a new asset. And all of our costs come through, including from the conceptual component, early in design, all the way through construction. And all of our projects do consider ongoing operations and maintenance. Next slide. So we'll be going through, this is the 5-year total capital program as presented for the fiscal year 21 through fiscal year 2025. As you can tell, water and wastewater are the biggest components of that, with some of our major infrastructure being done the next few years. And we continue through with facilities, streets, drainage, and parks is how our CIP is broken out. Next slide. We then further break this down into how each of these revenues are brought forth. As you can tell, of course, the biggest user associated with that is the Water and Wastewater Enterprise Fund, and then breaking down how we partner and utilize these funds throughout the entire CIP. So our next several slides will be going through each of our areas of the CIP, and we'll go through quickly as we go through those. You've seen them before. We've talked about them back in the Saturday workshop. So we'll just provide just quick renditions through. So our first one, of course, is drainage. And we're continuing on in that process as we work through our bond program and continue on also with some grant funding that was funded and found by Mr. Hardy. Next slide. Park CIP is dealing with our continuing our 2019 bond program and pushing that forward, and also has a couple TERS projects associated with that. Next slide. Facilities. Working, of course, again with our 2019 bond program associated with the animal shelter, working on our TERS projects with the library and reimbursement on that, and then our fire training burn building. Next slide. Continuing on, of course, with our police training center and going out in the out years. Next slide. Street CIP, back one slide, please. There we are. Street CIP moving forward. These are showing our partnerships that we have throughout with TxDOT on Makawa and Safe Routes to Schools. Next slide. Continuing on, of course, with our bond program as we continue to move forward in that design, and then looking forward to 518's expansion. Next slide. And again, continuing on, streets being some of our requests for intersection improvements or traffic signal upgrades as well. Next slide. And then heading into our enterprise fund, or the revenue fund that has been talked about, is our water and wastewater side. So our water side, of course, our biggest one is working on our surface water treatment plant in partnerships with Texas Water Development Board. And continuing on, please. Next slide. And continuing on, of course, of that as we continue to work through to rehabilitate our assets that we do have and continue to be able to provide the level of service as required for our system. Next slide. And then out to the out years of 22 and fiscal year 25 and beyond. Next year. Next slide. Next slide. And this heads into our wastewater side, where we have 2 of our 5 wastewater treatment facilities are under expansion and rehabilitation. Also looking to decommission one too as well, and reduce us down to 4 wastewater plants. And continuing on to working towards sanitary sewer rehab, and then on to lift station maintenance and lift station rehabilitation. Next slide. And then finally, out in the out years, continuing on with this philosophy in this program. Next slide. So this brings us down to what we truly see in terms of this fiscal year for fiscal year 21. Of course, the water and sewer side, those are large infrastructure projects with the surface water treatment plant, 2 wastewater plant rehabilitations, and a decommissioning of 1. Facilities, drainage, and streets and parks are working on our bond program as well. Next slide. And then this is showing here, associated with that, our process of where the funding is breaking down into which fund source it comes from. And next slide. Thank you. So that was a quick rendition and quick overview of what we talked about back in on the 27th of June in our Saturday meeting and provided to you in the packet tonight. So at this time, it's turned back to you, Mr. Pearson, for council to consider moving forward with this program. Thank you.
So again, Mayor and Council, this is the resolution approving the CIP that you've seen on several meetings and had for better part of a couple months here. I should mention too, the Planning and Zoning Committee reviews this. It's part of the state statute that they're required to review the projects, and they've done that, and that's been provided in the record as well. So turn it over to you for action. Thank you.
Okay, moving it back into our agenda here. Does the council have any questions or comments based on staff report?
Sure, I have a couple. One, to just kind of address some of the things that were brought up in public comment with respect to planning and justification for some of the projects. Generally, I'm confident that any thorough review of our 5-year CIP would justify more projects being added than projects being removed. But with respect to the comment made by the individual that spoke, the animal shelter, the budget is not finalized. And council has repeatedly stated we're going to try and get it significantly under the value that was included in the bond. The bond was an early number, so that's not the value we're definitively going to spend. And we provided direction on that. With respect to the library and the fire station, those were both through studies justified. We have an existing library on the west side that is overflowing. Is the most commonly used library in all of the Brazoria County system, and it's sitting inside a retail center. It just is not enough space, and not only is the library necessary, the building and the type of building that we're providing is necessary. It's not just a library, it's a community space. There's also, there are opportunities for HOAs to have meetings there. There are opportunities for people who do not have Wi-Fi or internet to go in and use publicly accessible computers and internet for searching for jobs or other uses that are necessary for those who don't have access to those kind of amenities. So the library is a necessary component to any community. And the West Side Library has long been needed. The fire stations, we did an extensive study to say, per the metrics that we are trying to chase, which is lowering response time, we need more facilities, and we needed the facilities and locations that we planned. That's why they're going where they are. So just to address those comments, there is no justification for us to just spend money for the sake of spending money. We're trying to catch up with projects that are needed, not pet projects that are somehow just valuable only to 7 members of council and not the community. With respect to the CIP, one, I can't ever say enough about the amount of time and effort into this. There's just a ton of work that's put into this. It's summarized pretty briefly. Like anything that's over summarized, it's easily criticized, but there's just so much work that's put into this. Staff, you really do a great job. I would say that, I made my comments on Saturday, so I don't offer any criticisms. I would just, again, request as part of this resolution that that we target to move up the Independence Park Phase 2 into either the 2021 or 2022 budget year. I know it's in 2024 because we would be targeting a GO bond. I know that we wouldn't necessarily have a funding mechanism in 2021, but I'd rather have the discussion in 2021 and push it back a year than wait until 2024 before we even discuss it. So as part of this resolution, I would like to politely request a second to move that up to 2021. That project just really needs to be completed, and waiting another 10 years before it gets done, I just don't think does that project and those who are served by that park justice. That's my only comment.
If you do that motion, Member Perez, I'll be happy to second that.
Okay.
I'll wait till others comment, and then I'll offer that as an amendment to the resolution.
Okay. That's a good back. One of the things we got to remember is that our national population monitors say that in 2045, we're going to be increased to about 9,000 million in the Houston metropolitan area, and we're going to get our fair share. What we're doing here is putting the base material and the structure in place with the right type of quality to prepare for that. So all through the matter of fact, this whole new business section is speaking to a lot of that, as well as our budget. So does council have any further question or comment on this item?
Mayor,
I'm sorry.
Councilman Little, when this water surface treatment, not treatment, but the water generation plant is completed over on the American Canal, will we have the ability to sell water to other cities? We have that capacity?
So, Member Little, that's been brought up, and we've told surrounding communities, everyone from Iowa Colony to Alvin, I believe Manville even, that that's available. There's not been commitments, and so we're proceeding. The plant's expandable, and we'll be able to have a better determination, but we'd be very open to that, but they'd have to tell us what they need and how much and go from there. It would be a small part of the overall operation there.
So we're not looking at any significant revenue generation from selling water?
None of the projections we have or the plans assume that, correct?
Okay. Just one other question. By 2025, with this additional $528 million in debt, assuming it's passed, what will be the city's total debt by 2025, total outstanding debt?
So the general obligation, we've seen that in the last, when we run our projections for the bond sales, the capital improvement program is shared to the financial advisors. And so they have that. I don't have that in front of me when you've seen it last, but we can show it to you again, if that would help.
Okay, so we don't know what with this additional 528 million. Obviously, we'll retire some between now and then.
Right. So we'd retire, and then one other factor would be all the TERS debt is anticipated to be closed down and reimbursed if that continues to perform in 7 years, 8 years, and so that'd probably be the bigger picture of that. But you've seen the ratios of AV to debt, and that shows that staying much lower than it had been 5-6 years ago. So that ability, it may be a bigger number, but our valuation has gone up more than that relative to the ability, the ratio.
Councilman Little, if I remember correctly, I think it drops us down to 3.2 or I'm sorry, 0.32, and we're like at 0.45 right now, 0.44, 0.45. So will significantly drop when the TERS pays off.
Yeah, I remember that. I'm just kind of curious about what our total debt will be in 2025. It's currently with the enterprise fund, I think we're over 600 million before we add another 528 million. I'm not sure what's going to be retired between now and the next 4 years, but it's somewhat scary if we had a downturn in the economy where we'd be. That's all I have, Mayor.
Any other comment from council?
Mayor, I'm in approval of the acceptance of the CIP at this point in time. I know as we move forward and we get further into the budget, we have the right to be able to strike something off of the CIP, as the CIP is just a planning tool. So I would be in favor of it for now until we get further into the budget.
That's good. Any other comment from council? Hearing none, Madam Secretary.
Mayor? Mayor, can I ask staff, if, do y'all have a slide that'll show the COs, I guess the source and use of CO funds? And I guess to clarify, now we're talking about, or I see a line item called TERS reimbursable debt. And so that is COs, but we're calling that out saying that it's TERS reimbursable debt. Is that right?
Yeah, we did that for the obvious reasons of it's a shorter term, and that's different in terms of that ability to where it's coming back from.
Yes. Okay. So when I look at the overall kind of summary sources and uses pages, I mean, you can kind of see where your COs are landing, and then look to that year or the year prior for the projects. Is there a clean slide or presentation showing what's directly funded by the COs?
No, the presentation is, as you just described, you'd have to each of those pages, but we could certainly produce that, create that for maybe when we do the intent to reimburse, so you can see that separately or before that, obviously. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we put some policy in place in the past in terms of what we're willing to use COs for and what we're not. And I mean, to my knowledge, staff's still following that guidance. But maybe for a future meeting or when it's applicable, if we can put something together that shows the source and use, I guess what projects are specifically funded by the COs.
Sure. Councilmember Carbone, this is Trent. And so for the GOs, or the COs, excuse me, associated with fiscal year 21, there's about $7.9 million there of COs. And those are associated with Fire Station 4, the Police Training Center, Safe Routes to School, matching the federal funds we got there. Expecting to need some match for the 518 project for land acquisition, and then traffic signal. Basically it sticks to that public safety theme. That's part of that, or where we're matching funds.
And if I could, Member Carbone, you mentioned this, but Trent said he pulled up those specific projects, and there's the matching piece of it significant. McCobbler Road, I was looking at the streets part. The city, for our participation with those COs is going to get 10 million, $18 million project. So it's those kind of matches the public safety buildings, and we'll recap that again.
I agree, and flipping through the details, that I guess the other one to call out would be the Clear Creek Trail, but that's one of the big matching.
Right. So that's a $5 million or something project. That's another one I was looking at that, for our participation, it's leveraging, multiples of the city local money.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Pearson, this is John Branson. Councilmember Little asked about the debt service tax rate over the next couple of years. For this year, our current year, for 2020, we've got 0.4344. What we talked about on the 28th was going to the structured principal option, which allows us to maintain that over a period of time. In 21, it would be the same. It would actually be a little bit lower, which would be 43.25 in 2022, 43.25 in 23. It would start to go up a little bit at 44.50, remain that for 2 years, and then start to go back down after that. And then when the TERS is no longer existence, then we've got a lot more space that could go all the way down to 32 cents. So that's what we've got over the next several years planned.
Thank you, Mr. Branson.
I had one quick comment. I just wanted to say, we just recently got our credit rating reports from both Moody's and from Fitch, two large international, highly respected credit agencies that rate everyone from the City of Pearland to the U.S. government. And so just as we're talking right now about, the fact that we, of course, are in these very unusual times, I just wanted to call out something from the Moody's report, which we received an upgrade in this past cycle. After reviewing the capital improvement program that we're considering tonight, among comprehensively our long-term financial position, it notes favorably. The city also conducts long-range economic forecasting and capital planning. The city has also been very proactive in careful expense management in response to the coronavirus pandemic, allowing for a structurally balanced budget to persist during the year. And so in reading these, this is a good check from an external source that about the ability of the city to continue to pay its bills and undertake responsible projects. And I think that's a useful data point to keep in mind. Of course, we have to be careful and cautious and conservative with taxpayers' money, but also we have to continue to provide these projects that are going to generate, that are going to serve the people of Pearland long term. And that can't just come to a halt when we run into a tough spot, if it doesn't have to. So appreciate all the work done on this, and look forward to the discussions ahead.
Mr. Luke, any other question or comment from council?
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of dovetail into what Member Carbone was stating. Right now the CIP is built off of the policies that we have in place. I know Member Carbone and I have entertained a conversation in the past about putting further restrictions on the certificate of occupancies if there's still a will of council to restrict those even further. I'm certainly on board coming up with a policy that specifically takes what we can and cannot use COs for, if there continues to be concern. And I also believe that we've had some preliminary discussions that over the next few budget cycles, we start modifying the amount of debt we take with respect to a cap on the percentage of property tax value. So as those policies come into play, the CIP will adjust as needed in order to be able to maintain those policies. So right now, this is not just because this projects out to 5 years doesn't mean that we're doing all of these projects in the next 5 years. So there's always opportunity for us to continue to be more financially responsible and continue to adjust and amend as the economy both contracts and increases. But we also don't need to be ignorant to the fact that the rain that falls out of the sky does not necessarily adhere to whether the economy is good or bad. And when people's houses are flooding and they're suffering economic times, that's not a good idea. That's not a good time for us to go to tell them, well, we're just not going to get to this drainage project. That's not a responsible approach from the city's perspective. If I may, Mayor, I'd like to offer the amendment to the resolution for us to move the Independence Park Phase 2 to fiscal year 2021. And I believe there was a member that was willing to second that.
Yes, sir. This is Hernandez with the second.
And just to clarify, so we're moving it up in terms of moving the project up, yet we have no hopes of funding it. So I'm scratching my head on that one. I mean, I get the intent is we want to have it happen, but we were just talking about issuing debt and COs, and I don't see a circumstance where I'm comfortable issuing COs for the project. So it just seems like we're saying, hey, staff, get working on this project. We don't know how we're going to fund it.
Yes, I'm aware that that's kind of a hole in the argument, but what I want to do is be able to have those discussions sooner rather than later. I don't think that this project, in my opinion, this project should have been left onto the 2019 bond, and I do believe that there are others in the community that really want us to move this project up. I accept the fact that if we move it to 2021, we may not be able to fund it till 2024. I'm just inviting the opportunity for us to have the discussion earlier as opposed to later. And if we don't feel as if there's a funding mechanism in place, we can punt it to a following year. I just don't want to wait till 2024 before we're having the discussion.
Any other council comments?
So what does that tell staff? kind of work on it, but don't spend any money? Or is it just giving staff, hey, bring this back before council to discuss it again?
My instruction would be as we get into 2021 fiscal year, 2021, 2022, for them to bring it up in the 5-year CIP budgeting process and say, this is now a discussion item that you had called for last year. Here are our funding options. Do you wish to move forward? If we decide at that point we're not attracted to those funding items or funding options, let's move it to the following year. If we do tell them, look, we do all agree that this project is important, and we think we want to fund it, but we don't want to fund it through COs. Are there other options? Please research that. Or can we pay for design and get a full budget and then see if there's other options in place? That would be my approach, my opinion. Again, I just don't want to punt it completely till 2024. That's my only request, is that we invite the state early.
An amended motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Mayor, there was a second, Mayor. If I could suggest, Member Perez, however you see fit, but the action would be to pull that $1.2 million, which currently has future CO, is what you're saying. We've done the preliminary. There was been some preliminary work. Rather than putting in that $1.2 million and trying to balance everything out in 21, perhaps if I could, maybe move that to 22. That would take the pressure and the need to, balance things out and do that. But it'd be moving up that much closer, so we start those conversations that you mentioned in 21. Because 22, if it's in there, then to keep everything, we'd be obligated to do our CIP and our debt and everything else to try to find a funding source for that. Kind of gets to what Member Carbone was alluding to or said.
Then Darren, can I amend my motion to, as opposed to amend the amended motion to be, instead of 2021, to be 2022?
If there are no objections from the council on amending that would be fine, as long as you can get a second on that.
I'll second the change to the amendment. This is Hernandez.
Sure. Any further comment from council or staff?
Madam President, I hope you're all right with that suggestion. I just,
okay.
It would cause some extra complications, I think. What's that?
Look, I get that I can oversimplify things, and it does require a lot of work on staff to be able to make those changes. That's not lost on me. So I appreciate your comment. I just want to try and move that project forward. Again, if I'm on an island, I'm perfectly happy being there, but I don't want to punt the conversation. So I believe, Mayor, we have an amendment to the motion ready to vote upon.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. We have a motion second on the floor, Madam Secretary.
So this,
talk it out for us.
okay, so this would be the motion to amend, moving independent staff to 2022, correct?
Right.
Okay, Councilmember Carbone?
No.
Councilmember Little?
No.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
No.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
No.
The motion fails 4-2.
The amendment fails.
Yes, the amendment fails 4-2. Thank you.
Yeah. Now we're back to the amended motion, right?
Right.
No,
So-
Mayor, we're actually back to the original motion. It is
Back to the original motion,
we're
okay.
voting on the original motion.
We need a parliamentarian here for a while. We're back to the amendment. We're back to the original motion. I think that original motion had a second. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, then Madam Secretary, let's see how this plans out.
Okay, Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
No.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
This is the motion to move it to 2021?
No, this is the motion on agenda item number 1.
To accept the CIP.
To accept the CIP, okay.
Yes.
No.
Member Perez,
Aye.
Member Orlando,
Aye.
motion passes 4-2.
Okay. I think there was some good discussion in that particular action item, and that's the basis of where we're heading in the future. So I think it'll work out. And I think perhaps, Clay, that we, as we go through the process, there may be some slight amendments that we can make that would be advantageous to all of us, and we can work that out later. With that information in the record, let's move to item number 2, which will let Councilmember Little dazzle us with his forensic here.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, second reading of ordinance number 1584-2. So moved.
Second, Moore.
We got a motion and a second on the floor. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the second reading for our normal standard mid-year budget amendments. There's just over 10 weeks left in the fiscal year. So as has been described in detail, this squares up reality of the experience of the city and our finances for the first more than half of the year, and adjust it to the conditions that we have. These are all necessary, prudent to adjust revenues and expenditures for the many funds that we're responsible for. If we get the slides up, please. So next, please. So these are the steps in terms of budget, which leads us to tonight. Number of actions, and we had the first reading July 13. And the next one, please. So one thing I do want to highlight, and would actually ask for an amendment to the motion, that'd be to recognize and formalize an increase in revenue between the last port and this one. We've closed out the month of June. And so that showed us a continuing positive trend on the permit revenue. And so that's been adjusted in here, and that's reflected in the amendment A. Attachment A. And so I ask that you'd consider amendment to that just to solidify that, and then adopt the resolution itself with our mid-year budget amendments. So we've been over this several times, shared this in many fashions. So happy to answer any questions from there. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, Council, have a question or comment based on the staff report?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend to reflect the additional revenue of 294,000 added since the close of June.
Second.
Good. Did I hear a second or did I not?
Second.
You have a second, Mayor.
We got a second. Okay. Second motion, staff report.
Nothing to answer.
Nothing else, okay.
Mayor, we're voting on the amendment at Carbone.
All right, ready to go?
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Little,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando.
Aye.
The motion to amend passes 6-0.
Information in the record. Let's move to item 3. Councilmember Hernandez, would you share this with us?
Mayor, we need to vote on the real motion now.
I believe we still have to vote on the original motion.
Your amended motion, Mayor.
Was that an amendment on that? Okay, and carried. Did we have a motion second on amendment, and then we're ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilmember, staff
Councilmember,
Carried.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Little,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
I will keep it up with it.
Councilmember Orlando.
Aye.
The motion carries 6-0 to amend ordinance number 1584-2.
And to clarify, that was approval of the motion as amended.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. All ready for the next one?
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action resolution number R2020-133. So moved.
Second, Perez.
Have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. So item 3 is a resolution that for recommending award of phase 4 of the State Highway 288 improvements. This was brought to you last meeting 2 weeks ago, and council asked we get some additional information and bring that forward. So we're prepared to do that. The recommendation remains to award under the competitive sealed proposals to Millis Development. So Mr. Buchanan's going to walk through some of the background, and then Mr. Epperson's going to chime in.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Last meeting when we discussed this item, as Mr. Pearson said, you requested that we expand upon the write-up we provided you with additional information on the comparison of the 2 highest scoring proposals and why we recommended Millis as the best value to the city, PDC, and the Pearland Municipal Management District 2. I'd like to start tonight with a little background to give you context to our discussion, and then turn it over to Trent, who talk about our use of the competitive sealed proposal process. And then Sheila Condon with Clark Condon, who is our landscape architect for the project, will wrap up discussing the 2 highest scoring proposals, along with the time and scope modifications we negotiated with Millis after they were selected as the best value. These improvements, as you all know, have been a long time coming and have been a priority in our current Pearland Prosperity Strategic Plan and our previous 2020 plan. This project is a strategic investment to preserve and enhance the economic value that has been created in the 288 corridor and speaks directly to the 2 community goals in our Pearland Prosperity Strategic Plan for economic growth and diversification through a holistic approach to economic development, and to ensure we are a quality place so that we continue to be a community of choice in Greater Houston. The 288 corridor in the last 25 years has transformed from a rural area to the commercial heart of our community, with millions and millions of square feet of retail, office, 2 major hospitals, surrounded by high quality residential communities. The economic impact to our community of the 288 corridor cannot be overstated. The long-term sustainability and growth of these developments are vitally important to our sales and property tax base that the city depends on to generate the revenue to provide the services to our residents. The 288 improvement plan is a recognition of the economic importance of that area, and was developed to plan a significant investment in the corridor by creating the same quality of aesthetics in the public right-of-way that will complement and enhance the private development in the corridor. When completed, the improvements will dramatically raise the visual impact of the open space right-of-way to create a sense of arrival in place, and not just 4 miles of nondescript, poorly maintained freeways that are common in the Houston area. The plan capitalizes and enhances on the nearly $1 billion in mobility improvements nearing completion in the corridor. The 288 corridor still has more room for growth to come in our city, and it's important that we ensure we have the aesthetics that long-term lead to an even better Pearland economy. A better economy for the city means growing sales and property tax base. Last meeting, I showed you the aerials demonstrating the tremendous growth this corridor has experienced in a relatively short period of time. The economic impact that is shown by our sales tax base that now is over $1.7 billion. And of that, almost $1.4 billion is represented by retail, hospitality, and food. If you look at our city, the vast majority of the sales tax base activity, along with the resulting economic impact, would be in this corridor. The reason the law allows economic development corporations to fund these types of projects is the link between infrastructure, aesthetics, and the economy of cities. This picture and the following photos were taken before construction started. show the contrast between our city and the other areas in our region that are more established employment centers that are economic diverse areas of choice in our Houston region with property and sales tax bases that we want to strive for. These two photos contrast the Memorial City area at Beltway 8 interchange with I-10 and our interchange with Beltway 8 and 288. This next photo contrasts Sugar Land's frontage road on State Highway 59 with 288 at Broadway. This last comparison is Broadway at State Highway 288 and the interchange at Westheimer and 610 in the Galleria area. This, for a long time, was the view you received when arriving at the Broadway entrance southbound on 288. With all of the almost $1 billion in major transportation improvements happening in the corridor, our key intersections at Shadow Creek Parkway and Broadway would have looked no better and more than likely worse if not for the public-private partnership we've created to implement the master improvement plans. This partnership was a major undertaking from working with the legislature, TxDOT, Brazoria County, and their toll road authority and the state's concessionaire BTG in Harris County on all segments, approvals, coordinations to make this project a reality. It all started, as I mentioned, in 2012 and 13 when we began meeting with property owners and city council authorized the creation of the management district, and the legislature later approved it. The management district created the crucial maintenance piece necessary to improve the corridor. 2013-14, a consensus was reached on the master plan improvements. In the fall of 2014, we began the design of the improvements outlined in the master plan to coincide with the completion of the roadway improvements. In the fall of 2016, the city entered into the interlocal agreement with the county and Pearland Municipal District 2 that spelled out the responsibilities of each party for the construction and maintenance of the master plan improvements. And in late 2016, construction began in Brazoria County on the toll lanes that the city had the county include all the first phase improvements in the county contract. In July of 2019, City Council approved Phase 2 and the Phase 3 improvement contracts. And I want to just briefly go over again what the improvements consist of, just a summary of the phases and the cost for each phase. For the Phase 4 improvements, just to better help you evaluate the best value. This rendering is looking at the McCard Shadow Creek Parkway interchange. Kroger and HCA are at the bottom of the screen. The master plan improvements include significant landscaping and irrigation throughout the corridor that include over 50 acres of green space to be enhanced in the almost 4 miles that 288 crosses our city. Improvements also include the 8 pear sculptures at the McCard Broadway interchange that are represented by the red stars, and the sculpture is shown in the top left. 2 years ago, we ordered the sculpture foundations into the Phase 1 contract, so those are already in place. The enhanced detention ponds that were needed for the road project will be amenitized, 2 at each intersection as wet ponds with fountains. Brick pavers at the intersections, which include demolition and reconstruction of the McCard interchange that I will show in a second. Cleaning and painting of all the bridges and barriers where previously only the new ones in the project were going to be painted. Upgraded decorative traffic signal poles to match the cities. Street lighting for both the McCard and the 518 interchanges, which are very busy intersections that now only have high mast lights, which are not adequate for the urbanized intersections they are now. Sidewalks, and then the Pearland monumentation like these that you'll see on the frontage roads. This next rendering just shows generally how the intersections will look with the pavers and the sculptures. And then this next rendering gives you a night view, lit sculptures or an enhanced underbridge lighting. These improvements are a partnership between the city, the county, the TxDOT, and the Pearland Municipal Management District Number 2 and PEDC. As I mentioned last time, no City of Pearland funds, property or sales tax or debt are being used for this project. PEDC is paying for these capital improvements, which is allowed by the Development Corporation Act and has been approved by City Council in previous reimbursement agreements. These are funds PEDC has on hands. We will not be borrowing for these expenses or depending on any future sales tax revenue to fund these improvements. The sales tax utilized by PEDC in a large part has been generated by the economic impact of the activity along the corridor. PMMD2 will be paying for the ongoing maintenance. A large thank you to all of our partners and the businesses in the corridor who almost 10 years ago recognized the issues facing the corridor and stepped up to address them with their support of the formation of the management district. So this slide just shows you the 5 phases. As I mentioned, phase 1 was the one that we did with the county, and some of those improvements are ongoing right now. Phase 2 was the pre-ordering of a significant amount of the larger plant material. There's the smaller plant material and additional plant material that is in the contract before you tonight. Phase 3 was the installation of the irrigation, electrical, and planning of the medians, which is completed. And then phase 4 is what we have before you tonight. And then we had a phase 5, depending on the timing of the northbound frontage road, but it doesn't appear now with the timing of that project moving along that that'll be necessary. This just shows, as I mentioned, we've invested about $4.5 million in the project to date on the first 3 phases. These are photos of the phase 1 improvements, including the foundations for the sculpture and wall around the water feature that you'll see at each intersection where the water features are. This next photo just shows you some more of the phase 1 improvements with the curbs and the medians and the sidewalks being reconstructed at the McCard and Shadow Creek Road interchange. And then this last photo on the left is looking south from the T-ramp at Discovery towards the Wishbone ramps at Broadway with the completed toll lanes on the inside and the general purpose lanes to the outside. With the completed landscaping in the median, and on the right is the median at the Beltway 8 interchange with the phase 3 median improvements that has also been completed. So this is the next slide is the cost proposal for the phase 4 master improvements that is on page 13 of your agenda request. But in this case, we added the percentage to show the emphasis on the various components of the project. As you can see, with the sculptures and monuments combined at 20%, and the landscaping and irrigation at 50%. This is important when evaluating the qualifications and experience of the proposals that we are discussing and their experience in completing similar projects of this size and scope. So we're again utilizing the competitive seal proposal process we have successfully used to carry out all of our previous 6 entryway and corridor enhancement projects. We found the competitive seal proposal process has allowed us to successfully implement these projects on time, within budget, in a high quality manner, utilizing qualified contractors. I'm going to turn it over to Trent Epperson to go over the process and the benefits of the city utilizing the competitive seal proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. And good evening again, Mayor and Council. I'm going to cover kind of the basis of the competitive seal proposal, the process itself, and then some of the benefits of that process. So Government Code Chapter 2269 establishes where cities can use the competitive seal proposal process. With that method, a set of predetermined criteria is then used to evaluate and rank each proposal that's submitted to determine the proposer that offers the best value. Some of those criteria that can be considered are price, experience, reputation, safety record, and proposed personnel that'll be assigned to that project. So the process is that we make a request for competitive seal proposals, and it's advertised by our purchasing office. We receive those proposals, and the evaluation team evaluates them based off the criteria that is identified in the actual request. So once the highest scoring proposer is determined, staff then may attempt to negotiate a contract by discussing the options for scope or time modifications and any associated cost changes with those modifications. And then if a satisfactory contract with the top ranking proposer is unable to be negotiated, the negotiations then must formally be ended in writing with that proposer. And then only after they've been formally ended can we start negotiating with the next highest proposer based on the original rankings. And then this process may be followed until a satisfactory contract is negotiated or until all proposals are rejected. So going through the benefits of the competitive seal proposal. Next slide, please. The competitive seal proposal is one of the alternative delivery methods that was established by the state legislature and made available to municipalities in 2007. So the alternative delivery process methods provide greater flexibility to choose contractors that can provide maximum quality and value on a project. Those alternative delivery methods that are currently available for our use is competitive seal proposal, construction manager at risk, design build, construction manager agent, and job order contracting. And I think you recognize a couple of those off that list. We've successfully used competitive sealed proposals in the past. We're using construction manager at risk on multiple projects right now, and we've used design build in the past, and we're using design build on our SCADA project right now. So we've availed ourselves to these alternative delivery methods because they do provide that maximum quality and value on a project. So for these monumentation and beautification projects led by PEDC, the competitive sealed proposal process has been used to produce the best value for the PEDC and the city. And it's really based on the following benefits. It allows project-specific establishment of weighted selection criteria. So we can set those criteria and the weight of them to that specific project for what's important on any particular project. It allows a closer evaluation of potential contractors based on each contractor's project history, capabilities, their subcontractors, and the key personnel they proposed. And we go through those as part of what they've initially submitted. And then we can conduct interviews to better assess the difference in value, capabilities, or performance between the different proposers. And in this particular instance, interviews were key to the process to better understand project history, project size, and capabilities of the different proposers that were not as evident with the initial proposals. And Mr. Buchanan is going to detail some of those differences, or Ms. Condon is going to detail some of those differences later in the presentation that came out through the interview process. The process provides full competition among the proposals based on the established selection criteria. It allows for negotiations with the highest ranked proposer to then obtain the best project at the best price. Results in the combined best qualified contractor and best value to the PEDC, the city, and the management district. And then in contrast to competitive bidding or low bid scenarios, in competitive low bidding, the scope and the cost are not negotiable after the bids are accepted. So you can't go back and take a look at the scope of your project, the timing of your project, and affect the final cost of the project at that point. You have to accept the low bids or reject the low bids. And then I know there's been some discussion of best value bidding, and that process through the statutes is not actually available to us for this type of project. Those best value bidding process is applicable to goods and services, not this type of construction project. So with that, just covering the benefits of competitive sealed proposal and why it was used in this project. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Matt.
Thanks, Trent. This list shows the previous 6 projects we have used competitive sealed proposal, plus this phase 4 at the bottom. You can see the final cost of each, and then the amount of savings from the value engineering time scope that Trent just mentioned. And on a percentage basis, we've had similar value engineering changes on 2 of our 6 previous projects, and that we've awarded to the proposal with the highest score on cost only once in the 6 previous proposals. And you can see we've kind of ramped ourselves up to this, starting on Colin, Pearland Parkway, Kirby, smaller projects, and then we did our largest projects, the $6 million, for a much smaller project than what we're talking about here tonight as far as area. But you can say we saved about 6%. On that one, we saved about 9.3%. And then what we're proposing to you here tonight is about 9.0. So now I want to talk a little bit about the primary scoring difference. And this is the scoring criteria that we initial 100 points that we base it on. The scoring criteria is on page 12 and 13 of your packet. So after the initial scoring was close, we conducted interviews, as Trent mentioned, with the 2 top scoring firms, which was Millis, and then the second highest scoring firm, which was Boyer. 3 criteria were then rescored after further evaluation. And the primary difference between these 2 firms, in addition to the cost that we've talked about, is the qualifications, experience, key personnel, project personnel, and then the experience with similar projects. So Sheila Condon with Clark Condon is going to review the difference between these specific criteria. And the slides I'm going to go over are identical information to the information we have on page 4 and 5 of your packet. Sheila? Josh, did you turn Sheila on?
Matt, does that complete your report?
No, Mayor, Sheila Condon's going to talk, but I think Josh needs to turn on her microphone.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Or Dan, if Dan can turn it on.
Sorry, give me just 1 second. It seems to be stuck. Hang on, let me see. Okay, let me try that. Sheila, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, perfect. Yes. Sorry about that.
Great. That's okay. Hello, Mayor, Council. Glad to be here tonight to talk about this very exciting project that, as you can see, we've been working on for a number of years, and it's exciting to move on to this next phase. So my goal here is to go over some of the factors that you all had asked for some additional information on 2 weeks ago, and Matt has touched on sort of the key pieces. It really comes down to qualifications of similar projects and also personnel, I think would be sort of the two primary. What we have on the screen are just summaries of these. I'm not going to read these verbatim. I'm just going to give you some of the highlights. So I'm going to start with Millis on the left side of the page. They provided multiple examples of projects that were completed in the past 5 years that were of similar quality and scale. This is a lot about scale of projects it's similar to 288 as proposed. They gave us very detailed project examples, and their project values are quite high. They're $11 million to $37 million. As you know, this one is $14 million. And some of the notable projects they included are Midtown Park in Midtown, the Woodland Hills in Conroe, Buffalo Bayou Park. Secondly, Shooter and Lindsay is their primary sub, and they will be doing the softscape and the irrigation, the landscape and the irrigation. They also submitted detailed examples of projects that were in the range of work $4.5 million to $6 million in construction costs. Some of those are Centennial Gardens in Herman Park, Cane Island in the western edge of Katy, and many projects at Bridgeland and Cypress. Also, they detailed not just the projects, but then they tied them to the people that they were presenting to run these projects. So we thought that was very compelling. Boyer submitted about 7 landscape projects that were completed in the past 5 years, and they ranged in costs of $146,000 to $2.2 million. So again, a little smaller scale. These were all, except for one, Textrat or Hectra projects, which meant that they were largely reforestation projects and did not include irrigation. They did not tie the past project experience with the specific people listed for the personnel for project management. We also have some images. We thought, it might be helpful for you guys to see some of the work, just a picture's worth 1,000 words. And if we could have the next slide. These are some examples of projects from Millis Construction. The two on the left is a large-scale $13 million recreation center and park for a community in the Conroe area. The one on the right, on the top right, is an $18 million Midtown Park in Midtown Houston. The bottom right is about a $16 million rec center for the Howard Hughes Corporation. These next pictures are representative projects for Shooter and Lindsay. As I mentioned, they're landscape subcontractors. So we have Cane Island on the top I mentioned, and on the bottom left. The two on the right are the McGovern Gardens, or sometimes called the Centennial Gardens, which are part of Herman Park. And those are pretty significant. These are, complicated landscape projects, landscape and hardscape, if you will. Landscape, lighting, signage, all the things that Matt mentioned when we talked about scope. Some projects that were submitted that went along with what Boyer submitted for their landscape projects. These are some examples of some highway projects. A couple of these are in Sugar Land, and you can see the style of landscape is the reforestation, a traditional sort of TxDOT. Nothing wrong with TxDOT plantings. I don't mean it to sound like that, but just a much more straightforward, much less complicated, and did not include all of the other elements that we're talking about in terms of other features and other factors. The next piece is about really the general contractor and what they're doing. So the general contractor is doing the dirt work, the lighting, the hardscape, the sculptures. In Millis's projects, since they have partnered with Schutter and Lindsay, 35% of the work will be performed by Millis's folks. Out of the 53 projects they submitted, 34 of those we felt were relevant in size and scale and complexity to the proposed 288 project. The other projects included similar park projects, hardscape, high level of finishes, and curated landscapes. Boyer submitted 95% of the work Boyer is going to self-perform. Boyer did list 69 projects, and projects were completed in the last 5 years. None of those projects really are a similar size and scope. I already showed you the sort of the range of the landscape numbers being 146 to 2.2 million. The other projects, although strong, were really focused on utility, water, sewer, drainage, electrical kinds of construction projects. So again, rather a different scope. The next piece speaks to, thank you, Matt, speaks to monumentation, sculpture, signage, that all those vertical pictures that Matt just showed you, those pictures of that are going to make such a statement in your corridor are key really to the sort of placemaking that Matt also talked about at the beginning. On the monuments and the sculptures, Millis will self-perform. They have similar experience for the Bridgeland and Veranda projects, which are Howard Hughes and the Johnson Development Corporation, as well as Woodland Hills, which is also a Howard Hughes corporation. Vistex is they're going to do this, the actual the sculpture piece, and they are the same contractor that has worked with you in the past on the Pearland entry monumentations on 35 and Broadway East. So everybody has seen their work and been happy with them. And they also, as I'd say the second, key sub after Schutter and Lindsay, they also provided significant examples. We'll show you in a minute of some of their work. Boyer had really limited experience with monumentation and signage. They gave us one example. And again, this includes after sort of getting a chance to meet with them and ask some additional information. They are proposing AD display signage systems to manufacture the sculpture and all the signage. They're a little bit more of a traditional sign contractor, I would say, and you'll see some examples of their work here in a minute. They have not performed any other work for the City of Pearland. A couple of examples of the sculptures that we're talking about and the other pieces. So this is examples of Millis and Vistex doing these signs. The one on the left, you of course are going to recognize. The one on the right is interpretive sign in a Harris County park. A couple of other, these are Millis's examples of work. Again, similar kind of detailing, not similar design, but similar detailing, level of finish, and the overall scale that I mentioned before. Couple more, next slide, examples, a large scale, these are big markers. Again, these sculptures are big pieces in the landscape. That Ellison sign on the bottom is out on the Grand Parkway. If any of you have seen that, it's very dominant. This last image is an ad display submittal through Boyer. This is the one example they gave us for really sort of highway scale monumentation. As you can see, it's in Katy. They're more prevalent in their work samples are illustrated on the next slide. As I said, more of signage type. Can you go to the next slide, Matt? There you go. So they do a lot of indoor stuff. They do some beautiful things, but again, kind of different applications. So these were other examples that Boyer included for their qualifications. Then the next piece is about really the landscape, the irrigation, and fountains. So as I said, Schutter and Lindsay is going to perform all the installation for the project. They've demonstrated this over the last 5 years. Their projects were current. In terms of the lake fountains, Lake Pro is to install the fountains along, then they were the contractor that did all those fountains along Pearland Parkway a few years ago. Boyer is going to self-perform the installation of the landscape. They're not partnering with a specialty landscape group. Of the 14 projects were detailed in the proposal. 8 were completed in the last 5 years. and 7 of the 8 were similar to the images I showed you a minute ago that were large-scale reforestation projects. We didn't feel like the complexity and the similarity was close enough to what is proposed and what has been designed and bid for the 288 project, and didn't really demonstrate to us that the experience of doing this kind of detailed landscape and hardscape and irrigation project. They did not name a sub for their fountain subcontractor. We talked about the subcontractor a little bit already, just to mention a couple other things with Shooter and Lindsay. They're just a very well-known, large-scale landscape contractor doing those types of projects that are in that $4 to $6 million range. And they also have an ongoing relationship with Millis, so this is not the first time the two of them have partnered in projects together, and that spoke to us also. We already know they work well together. I said before, Boyer did not partner with a landscape contractor. Their featured projects were a much simpler, less detailed type of landscape. On the personnel, this was another really very different in terms of the detail, what was provided. Millis provided, and you've seen this in some of the earlier packet information sent, Millis provided 18 pages of detailed resumes for their key project personnel, project manager, 2 superintendents, director of operations, and the owners demonstrating experience with similar scopes of work. So they listed very detailed, full resume. The project manager has over 30 years of experience and has coincidentally also worked on 3 of the Pearland's previous entry and corridor enhancement projects, so they're no stranger to you guys as well. The Boyer team did not include resumes or projects completed for the personnel that are suggested as being the project manager. The primary project manager joined the firm about 6 months ago and has about 10 years of experience. During the interview particularly, we tried to dig into that a little bit more about what were those projects and what kind of experience did they have, and they did not provide that information. So the last, this is, the next to last. So overall, when we talk to different references, the owners of any of the pictures that we showed you, combining, we also asked, information not just about the GC, but Millis and Shooter and Lindsay, because Shooter and Lindsay is such a key sub. They were very complimentary, highly rated, would return to them again and again. Boyer, overall, when we talk to their references, Boyer as a company has a stellar reputation. So the difference that we're trying to point out here is that their landscape group, which is internal, which is inside of their overall company, just had rather inconsistent responses from the client groups. It was a bit hit or miss, is how I would say it. Inconsistent may be a more clear way to say it. So those were very, very contrasting. Following the interview process and rescoring, as you saw before, Millis had the top score, and then only after that was finished and selecting them as our top scorer and our recommendation, then we had a conversation and asked the Millis team to give us some suggestions about where we could do some cost savings, because we know there's quite a big number difference between the Boyer numbers and the Millis numbers. So Millis came back with some thoughtful ideas and a way to reduce the overall number by this $1.4 million number you see on the screen. And the highlights of that are, they suggested if we could phase the project, we could have a series of substantial completions, and that would help in the overall maintenance costs during the length of the project, so we could close them out and turn over the maintenance, which will be done through PEDC. So that would help. That's where we got the $558,000 savings. There was a suggestion to use sod in a more limited way and not use it throughout the corridor. Use it generally where against hard surfaces. It also helps with SWPP. That was another savings of $500,000. They came to us on the pear and the sculpture monument signs, the 257. That was a real kind of their suggestion of really a means and methods. They suggested a slightly different detailing on the stone, and that the reason for the savings and the stone detailing a little differently was savings in stone loss. So making some of their suggested arrangements, we were going to have quite a lot of wasted stone, and that gave us that savings of $257,000. The miscellaneous items, there was some boring that was able to be reduced. We changed a fertilizer that's still a very good fertilizer, which was, about $25,000, to a slightly different brand. We were able to reduce traffic control that had somewhat to do with what was required by the city, and also was a little bit related to the phasing. So that brought us to the final number, the total deduction of 1.4 and some change. So with that, I guess we are still recommending the same action to consider Millis development with the current number of $14.2 million for the phase 2 of the 288 master plan improvements. And it would begin August to September of this year and be completed in January 2022. Excuse me. So we still have a little bit of a long haul. So I guess we will, Matt, turn it back to you and open it up for questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheila. So as I mentioned last time, this was approved by the Pearland Municipal Management District 2 Board of Directors at their meeting on June 24th. Oops. Sorry about that. There you go. I just wanted to give my kids a little bit of time here tonight. They're probably home watching. But it was as required by our interlocal agreement with the district. So this was approved by them. Obviously, they're going to be taking the risk of the maintenance. So the quality of this obviously is very important to the district, because long-term, if things aren't done well, or, materials die, or monuments don't work, or all those things, they're the ones that are at financial risk for these improvements. And the PDC board approved this on June 25th. And so tonight I'd also mention, I know Chad Millis, who's the CEO of Millis, is with us. Brian Schmidt with Shooter and Lindsay is with us. And also joining Sheila with Clark Conan is Jason Miller and Brandon Whitaker. So thank you for your time. And I know you have lots of questions, and so we're happy to answer those.
So Mayor Reed, I'll just to conclude and summarize a little bit. This is an important project. Mayor, you've talked oftentimes about trying to do things that make Pearland distinctive, and people say, wow, this is something that once completed, it'll be appreciated, and people really, love part of it. In the completion of the base to this point, it's a large project. Matt talked about it's 50 acres, and it's 4 miles of road frontage that comes through Pearland. But this is part, and this is an add to more than $1 billion of road work. So in scale of things, this is the finishing touch to make it distinctive and to make it a positive thing. So we come to you with our, after reviewing it and all the information we just shared here, continue with our recommendation for the best overall for the city of Pearland would be with the Millis development team. Thank you, sir.
Matt, the driving through Friendwood, through Sugar Land a number of years ago, I discovered that they'd finished the freeway that went through Sugar Land, and then Sugar Land really dolled up and made very impressive additions to their freeway. It had a wow factor. And what I like about this particular project here is we're not using city funding. We're using PEDC funding and the management district's funding. The complaints that we've had, our concerns that we've had over the past years, is that housetops is not going to be able to support the city that we're going to become. We're going to be more than 130,000 people. And rooftops won't do that. We're going to have some manufacturing and medical facilities coming into Pearland. And this is the way you show how a city really thinks about itself as something so very special. And I believe we will be able to use this type, not just here, but throughout the city, like you do with the 2020 plan, to make that strip of property on Kirby Drive too small. You're going to be running out of space over there, because I think there are going to be a lot of manufacturing companies that will say, wow, I love this place. Look at the quality of life here. And I would probably encourage my citizens to buy a house and live here. So if we're going to be able to move into the future, and we've got a lot of things negative here about Pearland. We're sort of outside the city limits of Houston, which creates a few problems for us. But we're going to be able, I think, to demonstrate, if you want to have a special place to build your building, or if you want to have a special place to build your house, or if you want to put your small businesses, your manufacturing company here, you're going to find that this is really a place that you can be very proud to bring your mother and your father in and say, look where I live, this is where I live. And I think if we continue working along these lines, this is not the only project we're going to be able to have to probably put in place. But I think it's a good example of how we can showcase Pearland. And as Clay said, I want to make it a wow city. And it's things like this is doing it, and it's not using city tax dollars to make it happen. So let me leave a little time for some of our council members to add in on that at this point. Council at this point.
Mayor Adrian, I just wanted to say thank you. Yes, thank you for that additional information on this particular item. I'm really looking forward to this. I go back and I checked out some of your other projects, and I spent a portion of my childhood living in an apartment complex over off of Broadway by Hobby Airport. And to see what y'all have done, the vision that was put in place there, and it's really just completely revitalized that whole corridor. I mean, it's like night and day from what it used to be. So I'm really excited to see that kind of a change here in Pearland. And to some of the points that were made about, businesses struggling right now, I think this is this type of thing that's going to attract businesses to the city of Pearland. They're going to have that staying power and really add to our economic base and diversity. And so I'm really excited to see this project move forward. And I think it's, deferring to your expertise on, who is the better contractor to get this job done. Looking back at the other projects again that I've seen that you've done, I have no doubt that your judgment in this issue is going to deliver a really, really outstanding project in the end. So thank you, Sheila, for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And Mayor, if I can jump in, I think it's a great project. And Matt, your beginning presentation, I mean, it's good. And we've been planning on this forever. I've got the issue when we were talking about a $15.6 million bid and compared to a $14 million bid, and then we go negotiate with the top bidder, and they're still $200K over. So, I mean, my stance of this project, I like it. I mean, I don't know that right now is the right timing to spend $14 million as folks are getting laid off, but in terms of the how we ended up with these numbers, I think there's more to be squeezed out of it for the citizens of Pearland. And I get it, sales tax, but I'd rather EDC have more money to help small businesses through the COVID-19 pandemic versus better landscaping. So, and I'm still twisted up. If you go back to your slide, we did some cost engineering on Highway 35 to Beltway 8, right? That was a good slide. I think it was $300K that
Yeah.
we did. What was the bulk of that?
Jason, can you address that? Or Matt, maybe you can do that.
You're on mute, Matt.
Hey, Josh, can you hear me? Could you also unmute Jason Miller?
Yes, he's unmuted.
Thank you. Do you want Jason to answer that, Matt?
Yeah,
What-
Jason, if you
what
can go ahead,
they're
I have
looking for?
I have no recollection of that.
The 320,000.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier today. So there were several items where we talked about with traffic control. There were things with different materials and different things like that. So it was several items relative to the same kind of thing with scope and timing that allowed us to reduce that cost relative to landscape arts pricing.
Okay. Was part of that the sod to hydromulch?
No, that was an add alternate. That was not part of the time and scope changes.
Okay. And yeah, the add alternate. I mean, that's as we talked about in last meeting. It seems like an add alternate for going hydromulch versus sod. Numerous things would have made me feel better about this, but that would have been an easy one to close the gap of $500,000. And I mean, we see it on all kinds of different projects. I still understand why not on this one now. And I guess the second question is, all the monuments or the signs that were designed, who designed the signs?
Clark Condon and our team,
Okay.
along with our graphic consultant.
Okay. All right. I guess, what do y'all think about the $250,000 decrease that I assume y'all are on board with Millis?
Correct.
So, I mean, why couldn't we have designed that $250,000 cheaper to begin with?
Well, actually, our budget for the whole project and that what we were designing to and our estimate and our budget was 16 million actually. So we're feeling pretty good about 14.1.
Okay.
Jason, do you want to discuss why Millis said that they can do this because of I think it's because of their cutting equipment. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's why they can do it. Obviously, people cut stone different, get different types of stone, can manufacture and handle different sizes of stone. And Millis, I think, has the ability to handle large stone. Jason, wasn't that accurate?
Yeah. So, and a lot of this comes into the fact that, we have done 6 or 7 of these, but they've always been one at a time. This is the first go around where we've done, 20 of these at once. So when you start adding up the quantity of stone you're doing for 20 signs, that cutting becomes a real number at that point. So when they brought that to our attention and relative to doing 20 of these sculptures, it became a real item that we would need to discuss. And that's where that number came from. And previous times we never had that issue because the cutting and the waste was so small because we were only doing one monument at a time.
And Jason, can you also address, we didn't do an add alternate. I suppose that was just a choice that we didn't.
Yes.
Do you think, what do you think the impact on the overall cost between the two is because of that?
Yeah, we typically try to go sod on all projects because obviously, ultimately, when you first finish the project, you have grass immediately. And during the budgeting process, like Sheila mentioned, based on using sod, we were still within our budget that we were shooting for. The conversation we had with Millis and Shooter Lindsay about going to hydromulch was really in the fact that we've had previous experience with Shooter Lindsay establishing hydromulch, and they have a very good application rate. So we felt comfortable enough to allow that option to take place in this project with the scope and cost reductions because of who the contractor was that was going to be doing it, not necessarily just as a cost reduction.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And I guess a question maybe back over to Epperson. How do we normally, we don't do a competitive sealed proposal for big road projects, do we?
No, we haven't done it on a road project in the past. We've done it on buildings and I believe that, and then these monumentation and landscaping projects.
Yeah. How do we bid out road projects?
Road projects are typically just a low bid project.
Okay. And I guess this is $14 million, and I feel like we hadn't given it our best shot to get the most competitive proposal out there. And that's my concern on the backdrop of everything else that's going on in the economy. I don't think it hurts to take this out to I guess first see what Boyer can do, let them kind of compare apples to apples. And if we can't get comfortable with them, go out some other way and y'all can navigate the legalese of it, but get us comfortable that or get at least where I'm at, get me comfortable that we've done everything we could. I mean, what I'm hearing is this is a great project. Millis has done great. Shooter and Lindsay's done great. Everybody's comfortable with them. That's all fine and dandy. We got a $1.6 million difference we're dealing with, and you know, everybody's great on the WebEx right now, but it's $1.6 million of taxpayers' money that I'm not ready to part with just because everybody's got, I don't know, everybody's in love with Millis and Shooter and Lindsay, and that clearly looks like they do great work. But
yeah,
I mean, there's gonna be bonds. They're gonna build. I mean, the plans we gave them, they're gonna do what we told them to do. So I don't know. If I'm the only one out, that's fine. But if everybody else wants to spend an extra 1.6 without kind of comparing apples to apples, that's cool. But that's where I stand.
Member Carbone, if I maybe could just respond real quick. So, you know, I think the only reason, you know, Boyer comes in with the number they come in with because they know, you know, that they're not going to have a chance to compete for this project on a competitive seal proposal. I mean, they've only done a $2.2 million project. So the only way they're going to get in the running here, or even be in the conversation tonight, is by coming in and giving us as low ball bid as they can, because they don't have the qualifications and experience to do this project. So that's the only way they were going to score. And we shouldn't have scored them probably with the similar experiences that we did originally. So the only reason they're in the conversation is because they did do that low bid, but that low bid has helped us to, you know, I think get the best value and a great pricing out of a contractor that does have the qualification and experience to do a project of $14 million and not test somebody to see who's only done $2.2 million projects. Are we going to roll the dice if they come back and, you know, if Boyer's 12.5 million, are we going to roll the dice and be their first project to see if they can do this project in our corridor and see if they can perform? And are we willing to take that kind of risk?
I guess let me kind of jump in. You know, I think if we were doing a lowest qualified bidder and Boyer was clearly inexperienced and didn't have the ability to manage this project, that would have reflected in the score. Them and Millis scored prior to the interviews very closely. So that at least makes me believe that when we reviewed and inspected the RFPs that we got from both of those organizations, that it looked as if they were qualified to do it. And so that's where I get a little bit of heartburn with. They're just clearly unqualified, and that's why that we shouldn't be considered. If they're clearly unqualified and shouldn't be considered, their bid should have been thrown out completely. We have historically done that in the past, but it's usually a gross amount of under qualifications to do a project of this scale for which we are proposing. I think there's no knock to Millis reviewing some of their stuff. Clearly, they do quality work. I don't have any concern. And I don't want this to be a commentary on their capabilities. It is a commentary on our capabilities to justify an additional 10% on the project. That's a difficult thing for me to go to the taxpayers and say that we are being the best stewards of their cash, because regardless of how we account for the money, it is still money generated by taxpayers. It's collected through a different mechanism. It is sales tax. So it's people that are choosing to use the money and pay the additional amount as opposed to property tax where it is more forcible, and it's allocated directly to PDC for purposes such as this. I do not want to scuttle the project. The project is necessary and beneficial. Everything you said about needing to invest in the corridor, needing to complement $1 billion roadway project, all of those are valid points. The difficulty that I'm having trouble getting over is the additional 10% on the project. Boyer's got a long history, from what I've seen and from the people I've talked to, of doing landscape projects. Maybe not of this scope, maybe not of this size, but I don't find anything in the information that I found that is definitively disqualifying. If I can't definitively disqualify it, basically very similar to the contractor who tried to low bid the Orange Street project, who could only show that they could do a left turn lane on a Waffle House. You know, that was definitively disqualifying. They clearly cannot do roadway work. Boyer is not definitively disqualified. We suspect that they may not be as experienced as Millis. Millis clearly does quality work and has the ability to do this, but it's speculative. And you're right. I mean, we're going to take a risk one way or the other. Are we risking an extra $1.6 million based on an apples to apples comparison that we're going to get $1.6 million worth of additional value? And I don't see that that's there in the write-up. Look, I think that Millis.
Can I ask just one quick question? Aren't we talking about, it's a $200,000 difference.
It's a $1.6 million difference between what Millis provided in their original proposal,
right,
and what Boyer provided. What we are comparing now, which I think gives at least two of council members heartburn, is what is reported in the write-up is a $200,000 difference, which at that value, there would be a fair argument about the delta and qualification. But we don't know what Boyer would have offered. We don't know what BE they could have provided. We can't prove where they would have been able to provide value. We can assume, because of what we believe to be Millis's experience, that they would have provided more VE than Boyer, but there's no way for us to prove that negative. And so we're stuck with, in an apples to apples comparison, it's a 10% increase. That is a value difficult for me to overcome. My suggestion is either we rebid it with BE values that are equal and allow each of the bidders to rebid in and make sure that we have a clear understanding of exactly where those values would be. Once we award, then we can negotiate with them and try and lower the value so that we can get the maximum amount out of the project. I don't think any contractor would have an issue with that. But to arbitrarily lower it to come up with a value that looks comparatively closer to the low bid, I don't feel comfortable that that is the right process. And I would also say we need to have a secondary conversation about how we present these projects in the future, so it doesn't look like we're coming up with an arbitrary value to select the contractor. So I'm not comfortable moving forward with there being such a big delta between these. I want the project to move forward. It needs to move forward expeditiously, but right now I'm more comfortable rejecting the bids and going back to rebid, and we lose a little bit of time, but frankly, the world's not going to fall apart if this project pushed off by a month or two. That's right.
Member Hurst, can I just maybe make a couple comments? First of all, on page 13, we clearly state in the fourth paragraph down what everyone bid. So what you're referring to at the back is the summary page where we put the scoring. It is organized by the score. And then we put the cost of what Boyer is with the score that they have. So we did not hide in any manner, shape, or form the price. The price was listed in the memo in the write-up.
I didn't suggest that.
Okay, I felt maybe you did, so I'm sorry if I took it that way. And then if you go back to the page 20 of the experience and qualifications, Boyer is at a 14.33, and then Millis is 18.67. So Millis is almost 20% higher on experience qualifications of key personnel. So that's a pretty significant difference between those two in that item. And then the one where I think, they're also second in both the similar projects, but not by a scoring difference that was probably accurate for this. for the difference that we've just outlined for you.
Is there not a performance payment and maintenance bond in this?
Trent, can you, I'm not familiar with what the performance is from a standard contract like this.
Yeah, our standard construction contracts would include payment bonds and performance bonds.
So why are we getting all twisted up on 1.6 million? If Boyer doesn't perform, we've got a bond to go after. I mean, and I guess I'm asking this as staff more so than our consultants.
Sure. So, you know, I don't know if this will exactly answer your question. I think, you know, one thing is if we had a road project that was $15 million and, you know, the low bidder we were looking at, the largest project they could demonstrate was about a $2.2 million project, we'd have a real hard time recommending that award. As far as, you know, going after a bond for something, you know, that's really a last resort. You never want to have to do that. It basically puts a halt on the project, so the project can be basically you do as-built as to where you sit that day. You have to go rebid that project to bring another contractor in. It's just not, you know, it's not a place that you want to go down. Now, I'm not saying that that's where we'd end up, but that's kind of an answer as to, you know, why you don't want to just say, let's rely on the bond.
Yeah, neither party wants to get there. I mean, the contractor's not going to get paid. We're not going to get the work done. I guess the other thing, you know, in terms of kind of negotiating, if something does go sideways, don't we have other contracts with Boyer? I mean, that would certainly be brought to the table, I'd assume, if they can't perform on one. I don't know. Anyway, I want to get some clarification on the bonding.
I would comment. Boyer is an infrastructure contractor, and we're a large infrastructure purchaser. So coming in low bidding and underperforming is not something that I think would work in their best interest. There's not a whole lot of cities in the region that spend the values that we do. So that would be a foolish idea for them to low bid and underperform.
This is Councilman Little. Going to the breakout of the detailed cost on this, on most of these larger trees, it says installation only. I looked through the entire spreadsheet and I couldn't find where we were paying for those trees. Can somebody point that out?
Like we bought those already.
They're already purchased. They were we're having some of the plant material grown, so that was part of a previous contract. So they're being grown for us right now. They're in nurseries. And the reason for that was because of such a large quantity of some of the material and making sure we had it uniform and had the sizes we were speccing. It was a better way to do it was to do the contract growing process. That's underway.
Any idea what the approximate cost of that was?
It's $650,000 plus or minus.
Yeah.
Oh. So this project is getting closer to 15 million.
More than that.
Well, 14.2 plus 600,000.
Remember, Little, we've spent $4.5 million already on this project, so it's the 14.5. It's the $4.5 million plus the 14.1 you're seeing here tonight.
Okay. Also in this spreadsheet, we've got 16 sculptures, Pearland sculptures, 14 Pearland Gateway monuments, and 28 Pearland stone monuments. I like the Pearland monuments, but do we actually need, what is this, 58 monuments of some type to let people know they're in Pearland?
You know, they're off to the sides. They're not the main monuments when you're there. Thank you, Matt. So it's a repetition. It's just part of the overall design that's been reviewed over the past couple of years and approved. So they don't all have the word Pearland. In each set of these, the vertical has the Pearland and then the others are stone. So they make up a little arc, if you will, as you're coming in like off of 518 and McCard and going in either direction. So they just set up another level of signage that's more a smaller scale. that relates to that size of a road, like the ones on 35 and Cullen Parkway. And the sculptures are obviously of a scale to be kind of like what the mayor was referring to earlier, some of those early big monuments, columns that Sugarland did quite some time ago. So the sculptures are really to be of that highway scale. So if you never get off into Pearland, you're certainly going to know you're going through Pearland.
But do we need 58 of them?
Well, there's several intersections, and there's, going in two directions. So I suppose we could debate that point. At the moment, that's what is in the design.
At a cost of almost $3 million.
Well, that includes those big sculptures too, remember?
Right. Well, I'm just not sold on this. The bulk of this thing is planting plants, and Boyer's done landscape projects to the tune of $3 or $4 million. Adding a lot more plants to a project just means they have to bring more workers in. I don't think it complicates the scope of work for them. I could see where the monuments might be something that's not part of their normal construction projects, but like Tony mentioned, and they've got a bond, and obviously we don't want to go that route, but they know they have a bond too, and they don't want to be sued. I don't know, that $1.6 million delta is a hard thing to swallow for the taxpayers.
If I may, Mr. Epperson, what is, can you guarantee, or maybe what is your level of confidence that if we were to take this out for a rebid, that we would get a bid that was either cheaper or a better value to taxpayers?
So first of all, I appreciate the question, but I'm not going to guarantee anything.
If I could say something also, Trent, before you answer that, if I could interject just for a second, I can say that also, if you could also in your answer address, because I think being a former contractor, being a former subcontractor, specifically in technology and doing these projects as a subcontractor, and I know most of you don't know that I had a contracting company, but we would go in and oftentimes clean up projects where we would have to go in for a company that was a low bidder who couldn't perform. And it was always a lot more effort on our part. We knew what the pricing was, and there was only so much that we could go, even if we wanted to compete against other companies. There's only so low that we can go to where we're just giving the project away for free. So quite often we would know what the previous price was. We were doing a cleanup job, and I think that was Member Owen's point last time. And I mean, what would I'm assuming that we did a lot of research on what the estimate was going to be. And I mean, there's going to be a floor where they just can't go below at some point unless we start just physically taking things out of this. I mean, what is that floor? I don't know if you can speak to that as well. Sorry to just pick up there.
Sure, no problem. Well, thanks for the question, Member Orlando, as well as Member Hernandez. My experience in going back out for bids on projects has typically been when you get one bidder and their bid is significantly higher than the estimate. And in those instances, you don't feel like you've got a competitive bid, and you want to go back out to the market and try to generate more competition and get competitive bids. I think in this situation, we've got competitive proposals that we evaluated based on that criteria. So if we were to go back out, I don't, it could go a number of different ways. We could have some of the participants that were involved this go around that they've gotten other jobs now, and their capacity to bid this job, is no longer there. That you could have, so you could lose bidders that way. You could lose bidders, for other reasons. And then, we may have others that come in that see this as more of a low bid opportunity to come in and bid it that way. But, I don't, so it's, not, and I think the other issue is that, we've had some time. So as time goes on, are we going to see higher or lower bids at the same time? So it's, it's hard to predict, especially since, I think we already got we got several bids this time or several proposals versus really needing to go back out to the market to make sure that we got competitive numbers.
There was just some discussion last time as well that, you know, these bids are now obviously public, or the portion that we've discussed are. So you would, I thought the discussion last time was that somewhat constrains the bidding range of any rebid that we would pursue. Is that your experience in the past, or?
Yeah, not having really done it in this type of situation, I think bidders they at least know what everybody's numbers were at that point. So they may be shooting for each other's numbers. But again, I think it really boils down to, do we lose any of the folks that were involved this time, or are there others that get introduced to the process? And then is there, kind of the time value of money, or is inflation catching up to anything, or are we going to see completed bids again, or and it's marketplace driven as well.
Sure, so I appreciate that. I guess what I would just add, especially going through the packet we received and certainly seeing the presentation that Sheila provided me, I'm not sure how we're viewing these two bids that we conducted interviews for as remotely comparable. Boyer didn't provide any examples of a project that was remotely similar. I mean, it wasn't just like not as many, or it was nothing in the same ballpark even. And then when you drill down into the subcategories, there were not comparable examples of monumentation. There were not comparable examples of landscaping. When we followed up with the references, they weren't particularly strong. And so I guess I'm just a little confused. That seems like the way bigger gamble to me with taxpayer dollars, that you're going to say, we are literally going to be the first type of project of this type and size and scale that this person has done, and we're going to hope for the best. That just doesn't seem very prudent or conservative. I just don't understand what the I don't understand kind of the idea that the two different bids that we just walked through again with Sheila are similar bids. And lastly, I would just add just something that's frustrating on this and in several other things. I mean, it's like, this has been something that has been worked on for nearly a decade. And then we get to the last stage on this and other projects, and we start nitpicking things that had been shown to us over and over again in terms of the overall size of it. I'm separating this from the discussion of which vendor, but on the overall size of the budget, and to Sheila's point, this came in under the budget that we've seen many times, and that was seen long before I even got on the council, and was continuously passed through the steps, including $4 million of spending that's already been allocated. Including these trees, by the way, that we have sitting in a warehouse somewhere, that if we do this bid again, we're going to pay for our trees to sit in a nice warehouse doing nothing. That doesn't seem to me to be a great use of taxpayer funds. But we come to this and say, well, why do we do this? Why is it this amount? Why do we have this many of X and this many of Y? We've seen all this stuff multiple times. I've seen it multiple times, and I've only been here a year. So I can only imagine that it's been seen more before that, and in the previous 7. But it's just this game where it's every time we get right here to the finish line, and then Lucy pulls the football out, and we don't want to do it. And so I just think, regardless, I think that we need to stick to our plan sometimes. But I guess I would just close it out on, I don't know how the alternative to this, which would be kicking it back out to the marketplace, we're for sure incurring the cost of prolonging, not doing the project for months. We're going to pay for the cost of the trees that are sitting in the warehouse. We already have the basis set out for the monumentation that we're now no longer going to do. And we may or may not get back a better bid. We might not even get bids from Millis at all again. We might or might not get a better one, and we're out here chasing it, for a bidder that clearly is not offering a comparable offering. I don't see the logic behind that, and I think it's not a prudent use of taxpayer funds.
I guess I would just comment a couple of things. I'm not an advocate of starting over or redesigning. I've known Sheila for a while, Jason and I've known for a while. I like their design. I want to move forward with their design, and I certainly don't want to go back to design. I don't think that's what I heard from Member Carbone either, or really anybody else. Or maybe some nitpicking about the amount of signs that we're doing, but it's not prudent for us to redesign. I think that the general concern is this. Boyer is not an unqualified contractor. They've got a long history. I'm not advocating for Boyer to be selected as the contractor. What I'm concerned about is the value of the experience. There is a threshold. To me, 10% is that threshold or above that threshold. Boyer, look, we're not talking about building a Lonza building that has very specific and specialty components to the design where only a handful of contractors can do this. We're not talking about somebody who's only done masonry buildings to try and do a tilt wall building. They just wouldn't know how to do it. Just completely unqualified. We're not talking about a landscape architect that's trying to build a roadway, just not qualified. We're talking about the value of the additional experience. And where is that threshold? 10% is a high threshold to me. Going over 10%, 10.4%, 10.42%, that's a lot to go to the taxpayers and say, we just felt like the value of this other contractor's experience is worth the 10.4%. I just don't track it in any of the write-up that there's the 10.4%, $1.6 million of additional value. If we were talking about a true delta of apples to apples of $200,000, all of the points that you made, I think, would be completely valid. $200,000, which is a minimum amount to the overall contract, is absolutely worth the additional experience. But where does that threshold lie? Certainly, if we had Boyer and Millis in here, and Boyer showed that they were qualified, and they were at 14 million, and Millis was at 30 million, we wouldn't pick Millis. So there is a spectrum for which we understand the value of there is a value to the experience. It's just a matter of where we draw that line. Mine is over 10%. It definitely, I can't come to a good rationale. As much as I want this project to go forward, as much as I like the design, that I feel comfortable saying we're going to move forward based on the value of that experience being over 10% of the project. I think Millis would do fantastic. I want them to continue to bid on projects here in Pearland. I am not trying to undercut their ability to do the work, nor am I trying to deselect them from doing the project. I am just trying to come up with a reasonable explanation of where the value of that experience is. Boyer they're a skilled contractor. If you look at their website, both them and Millis, looking at their websites, clearly can do a diversity of work. So I feel confident that both of them can do the project personally. But is Millis more qualified than Boyer? Probably. But where is that value at? To me, it's certainly not 10%. It's certainly not $1.6 million. That's why I'm suggesting that we go back. We politely beg Millis to continue to be interested in the project and want to rebid. Boyer and the other contractors as well. I know we feel comfortable with Millis doing it, so we certainly have established a floor. I just can't come to terms with the value of the experience being $1.6 million.
I appreciate that perspective. I think the only other thing I would add would be I find that to be more compelling if we're talking about something more commoditized like a road, and we say, okay, well, we're willing to sacrifice someone with a little less experience in order for a better price. I think that 100% makes sense. Here, what we're paying for is the thing we're paying for is not a road to get someone from point A to point B, and we're paying for the place. We're paying for placemaking. We're paying for it to look nice, for the landscaping, for the monumentation to look nice. And
yeah,
so,
we're paying for somebody to plant a tree next to the road that gets us from point A to point B, and for a monument next to the road that gets them there.
But you're spending this much money on landscaping to look nice, and then you call people who have used the one contractor and they say, yeah, maybe our landscaping doesn't look so nice. That's the whole reason we're doing it. So if you put it up and you don't have a good review of it, then why do it at all? It's different than a road thing. If you're saving 10%, but it doesn't accomplish your achieved aim, then it was all for naught. So I would say that's the difference.
Yeah, if we could compare apples to apples and it truly was a $200K difference, I'd say Millis and Shooter
The
and Lindsay
offerings
all day long.
aren't apples to apples. So you can't. You're saying the price is not apples to apples. The two things being offered are not apples to apples. I think anyone who saw that presentation from Sheila would agree with that. I mean, that wasn't an apples to apples comparison. So
Right. So what's the number?
I don't know.
I'm not comfortable at what we're seeing to say, yeah, I want to spend that much more money.
I would say too on the point.
If you are, let's vote. Let's get it over with.
On the point that was made about it not being Alonza, I think, looking at this type of stuff, it is to a degree. I mean, the fact that we have an architect presenting this to us, there is a degree of specialization, I think, that goes into the delivery of something like this, because it to me, to Luke's point, it is delivering a place. I mean, it's creating the Pearland vision that we've all been discussing for years, and not necessarily just planting trees. I mean, it's at least how I'm seeing this, or at least how it's been discussed in the past. So
my comment was not to the value of the project, it's to the complexity of the construction. I don't, while the design is fantastic, I do think that it requires some experience to be able to do what has been put in place. Again, it's not a 10-story high rise with a bunch of build outs in the middle of it that requires a whole lot of sub-coordination. It does require sub-coordination, and I don't intend to trivialize the value of what Millis experience brings, but it's from my experience doing this for 20 years, it's not that level of specialty where somebody with Boyer's track record, they have a long track record, they've done a landscape project before, could not do a similar project to Millis because they're clearly have never done anything like this. I don't see that in the write-up. Look, but I'm just one opinion. I think member.
That's our point.
Right. I think we've all expressed our opinion. Perhaps we're not going to compel each other in any additional direction. Only member we haven't heard from, I think, is member Moore, if he chooses to speak. But maybe it's just time for us to go ahead and vote.
Then, member Press, what would be your preferred course of action then for
the rebid
resolving this? So is that a motion or?
I think that we need to, if my instruction would be, if we vote for it, then we move forward. If we do not vote for it, then we have a subsequent conversation and a next council meeting to send it to rebid, or
I guess I would just say, ask Darren maybe what the protocol is, because it seems like we know kind of how that shakes out. So if it's the desire to get this rebid out expeditiously, then maybe we could save a step there.
That's actually a good point you raised. I was just thinking about that. So tonight, if the council looks like you're inclined to reject the competitive sale proposal to Millis, and if it's the council's intent to rebid this, then I would suggest that as part of that motion, not only do we reject this, but as part of the motion, indicate that we're rejecting all the bids and rebidding it. And then, of course, a determination would need to be made if we're going to rebid as a competitive sale proposal, or if we're going to go out as a lowest responsible bidder. On the other hand, if the council's intent is to reject this, then we'll, of course, notify Millis that we're ending negotiations with them. But if the intent is to move to the next bidder, which in this case would be Boyer, and then initiate negotiations with them, we can do that as well. I would recommend that whatever the council feels like you would like to do at this time, if you want to save a step in that process, now would be the time to do that. So if it's going to be rejected, what the intent is, so the staff knows moving forward what the next steps are going to be.
Well, Matt, can I ask a question, Matt? If we go back out for bid, To what degree would EDC be involved, also Clark Condon, in going through all of these interviews again? And what would the time element be on that? I mean, would there be an additional cost for any of this?
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, there'll obviously be the cost of the stuff that we have in a nursery right now that we're going to have in the nursery for a longer period of time, which we're going to have to pay. I think they said about $30,000 a month. Obviously, there's going to be the generating the new bid documents and going through the process again would be a cost. And then, yeah, we're going to have to go back to PMMD2 and get their approval. We'll have to go back to the PDC board and get their approval. So, you know, that's a 2-month process.
And that would be to close a potentially a $200,000 difference. I mean, we could eat that up, burn that up pretty quickly, it seems.
No,
Some would say 200, some would say 1.6 million.
Yeah, we don't know what Boyer's bid would be if they included hydromulching and stuff.
That's correct. I mean, but it could also, you know, that's all correct. But I mean, there's a lot of.
You're right. There's no way to know. There's no way to know if it's a true $1.6 million, that's why I am struggle to make this decision. I think maybe just to keep things simple and so we can move on to borrow the suggestion from Member Orlando, I will propose that a motion for us to reject all bids and rebid.
Is it a CSP?
Lowest qualified bidder, yes.
Second.
Here, a second on that.
Yep.
I seconded it, Mayor.
Do we have motion second on that?
We have a motion and a second, Mayor. So we want to vote on that motion. If that motion
Just be
fails,
technical. There's a motion on the table to award. So should that be rejected, or how do you want to do that?
Well, I think, Clay, I think what we need to do here is obviously there's an agenda item to award to Millis this evening. That needs to be voted on. And as I think what we're saying is part of that, when we do that, we're trying to get some direction to staff so that when we go back after this is rejected, we'll notify Millis in writing that we're ending negotiations with them. And if the intent then is for staff to notify the rest of the bidders, then we notify the rest of the bidders we're rejecting all those bids, and that we're going to come back to council with a new rebid. And it's like what's being proposed by Council Member Perez is to come back with a rebid as the lowest responsible bidder. I wouldn't recommend that we actually vote on that per se tonight, just simply because that's not actually part of the motion or part of the agenda item. But I think it would be adequate direction to staff is what we need to do moving forward.
Right. So my question was, like, there's a motion to award as Millis, as you said. So shouldn't that be dealt with, and then the understanding to come back with the competitive sealed proposals, start all over with that process?
Correct. I think if there's a motion tonight, if on the vote on that motion, if they would like to amend that motion to provide some additional direction to staff with respect how to move forward, then I think we can do that. But it would really just be amending the existing motion so that staff knows that they can move forward and notify the other proposers in this process that we're not going to be negotiating with any of them moving forward.
Darren, could we do this? Could we table the initial motion and then propose on the an alternate motion? And then if the alternate motion fails, we can bring up the other motion, or can we propose a secondary motion if the initial motion fails?
Well, my concern is that the motion that you proposed is not consistent with the agenda, and it's not adequately posted as an agenda item. So I would not recommend doing that moving forward. So that's why I'm proposing that we go ahead and take action on the motion that's on the agenda, and then include in that direction to staff moving forward.
Yes.
Well, if the give direction to staff and the motion fails, then there's nothing that passes. I mean, I think staff knows if it fails, we want them to rebid, or at least that's my request. We don't need a motion to do that. Then I'm comfortable us moving forward and get the straight up and down vote, and then staff knowing the direction that those who may vote against it would like to go.
Well, under 2269, the next step in this process, by just simply voting this down and the staff not having further direction, then the next step in the process is by default to go to Boyer and start negotiating with them.
And I don't want to do that. I don't want to look as if we're trying to select Boyer, because that's not what I'm trying to do.
I'm just trying to clarify that we're voting again on whether or not to award to Millis tonight. As part of that, if there's at least enough direction from council, once that's voted down, if it's voted down, then to go ahead and proceed with ending that process and not moving forward with any further negotiations, so that we can do that. Because this was not put on the agenda as an item to reject any and all bids for the project. That's not the way it's posted on the agenda.
But there's not really a good way for us to put in a failure clause in an amended motion.
One quick question before we go to the vote. What happens with all the stuff that we have growing in the nursery? I mean, is it simple as they hold on to it, or do we lose money because of we're not going to utilize those trees and bushes and shrubs and whatever?
Sheila or Jason, do you want to address kind of what the clauses we have in the contract are?
Sure. So in the on the growing contract, we have already in it by month what cost it would be to maintain that material, which is, as Matt already said, about $30,000 a month. When we all think that, you know, this doing what might happen, it's probably more like a 4-month window to go through this redo. So think about it maybe around that time frame. There is a possibility, and we'd have to get into a little more of the weeds on this, there's a possibility that a few of the things then would need to be bumped up to larger container sizes. And, you know, so we'd have to look at that too. But at a minimum, we have the holding where they're maintaining them in nurseries, they're irrigating them, they're pruning them, they're feeding them. We may, if we delay too long, we may bump up against the time frame where a shrub or a tree has to be bumped into a larger container. And that possibly could be additional services for the grower.
So Sheila, the bottom line, I heard earlier today, like it's $30,000 a month roughly for them to hold on our material. We lose the material member more, but it's $30,000 a month for them to take care of that.
Correct.
You're estimating 4 months, so roughly $120,000 additional cost.
Yes.
Yes, 120, 130, something like that. Mm-hmm.
And just to continue arguing that, so that's going to be a tree that's 4 years older, a shrub that's bigger, that may be from a 10-gallon to a 15-gallon, so it would have a better chance of surviving once it does get planted. So I mean, it's not
actually
that's
that's actually a little bit counterintuitive. That does seem like the way it goes, but not necessarily.
I think it's acceptable. It's not free for us to rebid. So there's a cost to it. Who knows what the total cost is? It's a guess.
So it's good to help out. So the motion that was posted, that was made, and the agenda item was for the recommendation from Millis. So I suggest that council act on that. And if that's rejected, or if it's passed, we'll move forward. If it's rejected, we'll go out for a brand new competitive sealed proposals and bring that back to you ASAP.
Aaron, do you need to take action for us to reject Boyer's bid as well?
No, I don't. I think we have authority to formally reject their bid or have council take action on that. I think based on the discussion tonight, staff would have the ability to notify them that we're ending negotiations and that we're going to rebid the project.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Again, if we vote no against this, I want us to immediately go into bid, and there not have to be any additional motions or actions if that's possible, legally if that's possible, so we can, starting tomorrow, Sheila's team and Matt's team can initiate another bid and try and invite everybody who bid on it to do an apples to apples bid and come back to us as quickly as possible. That's my preference.
Unless I hear something different from council right now, is if this were voted down this evening, right now the motion to award to Millis, and that's voted down based on the discussion, at least there may be it appears to be a consensus to go ahead and end negotiations with all bidders and go ahead and rebid this project. And so we can proceed in that vein.
Okay. Just a comment to Millis. Regardless of what happens, I hope that you're still interested in the project. So I think we're ready to vote. Darren, we don't have to do anything to kill the previous motion in second.
No. I think the motion, the motion that's actually is up for vote is the motion to award that was seconded, and that's the one that we're going to be taking action on, correct?
But Trent made a secondary motion as well.
I think maybe Darren's saying that wasn't a valid motion. We don't need to address it.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying is I didn't think that motion was consistent with the agenda, and so I didn't think, as you just indicated, I didn't think it was valid, and so we'll need to take action on the motion that was pending on the table for discussion now, the original motion.
All right. Clear as mud. Thank you for pointing out my incompetencies, Aaron.
Crystal, if you could call, it sounds like they want to call a question for the original motion on the recommended action. So the vote yes would be to award to Millis, and no would be to reject that.
Absolutely. Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
No.
Councilmember Perez,
No.
Councilmember Orlando,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
No.
Councilmember Little.
No.
Motion fails 4-2.
Okay. There's clear direction on how to move forward now.
So Mayor, the next motion's up for the Halleck design. Dan, agenda up for Joshua.
Yes, give me just one. All right, trying to get it up. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we're ready for item number 4, please.
Okay. Moving to item number 4, Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Moore for the number 4.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action resolution number R2020-136. So moved.
Second, Hernandez.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 4 is a recommendation for authorizing the Pearland Economic Development Corporation to proceed with design services engineering for Halleck Street construction. This is a small road west of State Highway 35 Main Street. We're already proceeding successfully on the adjoining paired road to the south there. This is north of the Holiday Inn for reference. And so council may wonder why this is even before you. Normally the amount is small and PDC to proceed with this with their funds. This is an improvement to a commercial area, but there was some questions expressed. So we wanted to just provide this back to you, and Mr. Buchanan will run through a presentation on the logic and the recommendation that's here for you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mayor and City Council, tonight for your consideration, we have a PDC expenditure for the professional services agreement with Freeze and Nichols for the Phase 3 improvements of the redevelopment activity we've been carrying out in what we refer to as the Rice Dryer redevelopment area. These redevelopment efforts have been a combination of improving public infrastructure, including the roads, utilities, drainage on both Rice Dryer and Halleck, in addition to the redevelopment and cleanup of the environmentally contaminated MChem property on Rice Dryer, and the demolition and redevelopment of the former Rice Dryer elevators on Rice Dryer and Halleck. As Clay said, concern was expressed at a previous meeting on whether these were appropriate funds to be used by the EDC. So we wanted to give council an opportunity to provide guidance on this phase before we invested any more in finishing the design and engineering, which we're at 30% now at for the project, and put it out to bid later next year. As a way of background, the Development Corporation Act, PDC is allowed to invest in public infrastructure without the requirement of any primary jobs or new investment being created if ultimately the infrastructure promotes existing or future business enterprises. PDC has done a significant amount of public infrastructure for the city under this provision and was and continues to be one of our main uses of the corporation's funds. Utilizing this provision, the corporation, for example, has extended the water and sewer lines down both Broadway, Beltway 8, Main Street, constructed both the McCard and Bailey bridges over the railroad, and most recently, the Rice Dryer reconstruction would be another example of a project that did not create primary jobs. The redevelopment and infrastructure project in this area accomplishes multiple initiatives in two focus areas in our Pearland Prosperity Community Strategic Plan. These include positioning State Highway 35 as a priority for development by assuring the area has the best-in-class infrastructure and to support development and to implement the State Highway 35 corridor redevelopment strategy. The 35 strategy was approved in 2016 and has a vision of the corridor as a high-quality, consistently designed employment and business environment with compatible land uses and supportive amenities. One of the 5 catalyst projects is what's called Business Park North, which is a series of projects to be completed in the corridor to increase economic activity in underutilized areas that will act to expand and strengthen the community's job and tax base. This next slide, the aerial on your right shows the general areas recommended in the strategy that focus on the Business Park North Catalyst area. The Rice Dryer redevelopment area is highlighted in pink. And as council is aware, over the last 3 years, we have active projects working in 3 of the 4 highlighted areas that are shown on this map. The redevelopment area is zoned predominantly M1 or light manufacturing with 2 planned developments that also allow light manufacturing. This map shows the recently developed areas in red, currently proposed developments in blue, and possible areas for future development in yellow. PEDC has actively recruited 2 companies to the area, including the ERS CAP facility, which just opened, which is located where the former MChem facility was, and West Texas Cooling, which fronts both Halleck and Rice Dryer. Besser Plumbing is building their new facility on Halleck, and Third Coast Terminals recently purchased the remainder of the former elevator site. If you haven't driven down Halleck in a long time, there is more activity on the street than was there before. This is a list of some of the businesses on the street, with Besser Plumbing, which I mentioned being the most recent addition. And also the Pearland Settler Cemetery is also there. So here's a few pictures. Trigon, which has been on the street for a long time, is in the top right. You can see they've got a bridge over the large ditch in front of their project. There's the new business park, which has tenants like Electro Rent Corporation. This is Besser's new building. The building's been constructed. They haven't done their site work yet. There's a vacant lot along Halleck, and then the Holiday Inn has been there for a number of years. This next tax slide just shows you the taxable value of the corridor of the Halleck Street. So these are the taxable, the real and personal property tax value of just the properties fronting Halleck and not the entire redevelopment area. As you can see, the small street has over $20 million in taxable value, with this amount doubling in just the last few years with the addition of West Texas Cooling and the business park, which is around $8.2 million. This is a map you've seen before, but the public infrastructure is being completed in 3 phases in the redevelopment area. Phase 1 included the detention for both Rice Dryer and Halleck. Phase 2 is the reconstruction of Rice Dryer that is currently under construction. And phase 2, which is tonight's item, includes the reconstruction of Halleck and the outfall conveyance from Halleck to Rice Dryer, which is this blue line here. The original conveyance from Rice Dryer all the way down to the Old Town Ditch was completed in phase 1. So here's just the budget. It's about $3.5 million in total, plus the amount the developer contributed for the phase 1 improvements. Phase 2 was about 1.2 million. And then phase 3 is more expensive. It's a little bit longer. And then it also has that conveyance that's not included in phase 2. Just a couple pictures to show you if you haven't driven down Rice Dryer. The construction is underway with a lot of utility work. And then this next slide just shows you the current condition of Halleck. It's a narrow 2-lane rural cross-section road. Obviously, it was originally purpose was to serve the fields on both sides of it. Has since been asphalt overlay with open ditch. Has poor subbase and drainage. As I mentioned, transferred from a rural area to a commercial light industrial area. And in 2018, the pavement and condition index rating for Halleck was 56, which is below the average asphalt rating for the city of 72. Just real quick, what the improvements are: 38 wide concrete road with curb and gutter, storm sewers, which are open ditch now, a shared detention facility, which we've already constructed. So the existing detention facility was contemplated for both the drainage of Rice Dryer and Halleck. 6-foot sidewalks with a brick paver strip, drainage from the lateral from Halleck to the Old Town Ditch. So the total 3 phases that I mentioned has a 10% contingency on these last 2 phases. 50% has been committed to date with $690,000 we've spent. The whole Rice Dryer area at the end will serve approximately 50 acres of development. The PDC board approved this at their June meeting, and so we're asking for your consideration tonight. And Ron Bavarian with Freeze Nichols is joining us also tonight. Mayor, that's our presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Good. Council, have any questions or comments based on our staff report?
Yes, Mayor, I guess I'll start off. I think I've been kind of a vocal distractor of this project. I don't disagree with what Matt is saying as far as the necessity for the road to be rebuilt. I just don't appreciate the funding mechanism. The road is in disrepair. It certainly could. It certainly could stand to be demoed and replaced, but this is a capital project, not an EDC project. Unless there is a developer that is partnering with us or a specific employer that's going to go in and would not go in but for this this roadway to be improved, I don't think the funds from the EDC are being appropriately used to improve Halleck. I don't functionally believe we should be spending economic development dollars to get to a dead-end road that ends with a cemetery. And I don't mean that, please excuse my sarcasm, but I just don't. I think there's other places that we could utilize those funds that would have a bigger and greater impact. The value is there. It's $20 million worth of value on the ground, but building this road doesn't double that value. So we would not see, in my opinion, a significant return on the investment if we built this road. So I'm going to be a no on this project for those reasons.
Any other comments from council?
Yes, Mayor, I have comments. So I seen in here where we talked about we're not only are we putting in the road, we're putting in a sidewalk with paver stones. I mean, how necessary is that? I just don't see that putting in a sidewalk with paver stones in an industrial area is worth the cost.
Sure, remember more. So sidewalks are required in all of our subdivisions, whether they're industrial or commercial or residential. So we'll be putting the sidewalk in, and then the strip between the back of the curb and the sidewalk is so narrow. This is a narrow right of way. So that it's easier maintenance to put the bricks in than trying to have a, 12-inch strip for someone to try to maintain.
Council have any other questions or comments on this?
I guess in following up to Perez's comment, is there any additional development coming down Halleck that we know of?
So the only, there are two things. There is one vacant lot there that could still develop. Besser is under construction, and then all the property around Besser on the map. Let me try to go back real quick. Was bought by Third Coast, and Third Coast is going to store trailers there. So that'll be a significant amount of activity. Excuse me here. So Third Coast bought this. They have access to Halleck, and then they have access to Rice Dryer, but their intention is just use that as for trailer storage.
And we won't even get personal property off that, will we? Maybe a little bit ad valorem.
Yeah, maybe. It depends on. I think sometimes they store stuff in their trailers, but for longer terms. But it's purely speculation.
Yeah.
So the council comments?
Mayor, just to summarize a little bit, I would see this as investment for in infrastructure for a business area that's more about the retention for existing, and I'm not saying that these places are good enough to leave tomorrow, but it is, and we've talked in the past about wanting to do things for existing Pearland concerns, and as was described between Trigon and Rock and the Holiday Inn and the West Texas Cooling, those are all existing Pearland businesses that we won't be able to get to this road in the foreseeable future from other operations. That's all.
One quick question, Matt. What was the Board of PDC's vote on this?
They approved it 6-0. 6-0.
Appreciate it.
Well, the council want to take a vote on this item?
I know I'm voting. I'm ready.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, Madam Secretary, I believe we're ready for a vote.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Perez,
No.
Councilmember Orlando,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
No.
Councilmember Little, Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
We do have a tie, Mayor, 3-3.
The mayor votes aye.
The motion passes 4-3.
So Mayor, that's I think you're ready for item 9 or group 9 there.
Yeah, moving in our agenda to item number 9, Mayor, council issues for council discussion. Item 10, other business, none. Adjournment. Clock says 9:45.
But have a good night.
Night. Thank you.